can use a perfect example of
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. It's the Mueller Report. We're on page 102. This is about campaign work that Carter Page did for the Trump campaign. Following the convention, Page's trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russia foreign policy drew the media's attention and began to generate substantial press coverage. The campaign responded by distancing itself from Page, describing him as a, quote, informal foreign policy advisor who did not speak for Mr. Trump or the campaign, end quote. On September 23, 2016, Yahoo News reported that U.S. intelligence officials were investigating whether Page had opened private communications with senior Russian officials to discuss U.S. sanctions policy under a possible Trump administration. A campaign spokesman told Yahoo News that Page had no role in the campaign and that the campaign was not aware of any of his activities, past or present. On September 24, 2016, Page was formally removed from the campaign. Although Page had been removed from the campaign after the election, he sought a position in the Trump administration. On November 14, 2016, he submitted an application to the transition team that inflated his credentials and experiences, stating that in his capacity as a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor, he had met with top world leaders and effectively responded to diplomatic outreach efforts from senior government officials in Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. We're now on page 103. Page received no response from the transition team. When Page took a personal trip to Moscow in December 2016, he met again with at least one Russian government official. That interaction and a discussion of the December trip are set forth in Volume 1, Section 4. Number 4, Dmitry Simes and the Center for the National Interest. Members of the Trump campaign interacted on several occasions with the Center for the National Interest, CNI, principally through its president and chief executive officer, Dmitry Simes. CNI is a think tank with expertise in and connections to the Russian government. Simes was born in the former Soviet Union and immigrated to the United States in the 1970s. In April 2016, candidate Trump delivered his first speech on foreign policy and national security at an event hosted by the National Interest, a publication affiliated with CNI. Then Senator Jeff Sessions and Russian Ambassador Kislyak both attended the event, and as a result, it gained some attention in relation to Sessions' confirmation hearings to become Attorney General. Sessions had various other contacts with CNI during the campaign period on foreign policy matters, including Russia. Jared Kushner also interacted with Simes about Russian issues during the campaign. The investigation did not identify evidence that the campaign passed or received any messages to or from the Russian government through CNI or Simes. Subtitle A, CNI and Dmitry Simes connect with the Trump campaign. CNI is a Washington-based nonprofit organization that grew out of a center founded by former President Richard Nixon. CNI describes itself, quote, as a voice for strategic realism in U.S. foreign policy, end quote, and publishes a bi-monthly foreign policy magazine, The National Interest. CNI is overseen by a board of directors and an advisory council that is largely honorary and whose members at the relevant time included Sessions, who served as an advisor to candidate Trump on national security and foreign policy issues. Dmitry Simes is president and CEO of CNI and the publisher and CEO of The National Interest. Simes was born in the former Soviet Union, emigrated to the United States in the early 1970s, and joined CNI's predecessor after working at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Simes personally has many contacts with former and current Russian government officials, as does CNI collectively. As CNI stated when seeking a grant from the Carnegie Corporation in 2015, CNI has, quote, unparalleled access to Russian officials and politicians among Washington think tanks, end quote, in part because CNI has arranged for U.S. delegations to visit Russia and for Russian delegations to visit the United States as part of a so-called, Track 2 diplomatic effort. On March 14, 2016, CNI board member Richard Plepper organized a luncheon for CNI and its honorary chairman, Henry Kissinger, at the Time Warner Building in New York. The idea behind the event was to generate interest in CNI's work and recruit new board members for CNI. Along with Simes, attendees at the event included Jared Kushner, son-in-law of candidate Trump. Kushner told the office, that's the special prosecutor, the Mueller office, that the event came at a time when the Trump campaign was having trouble securing support from experienced foreign policy professionals, and that as a result, he decided to seek Simes's assistance during the March 14th event. Simes and Kushner spoke again on March 24th, 2016 on the telephone, 3 days after Trump had publicly named the team of foreign policy advisors that had been put together on short notice. On March 31st, 2016, Symes and Kushner had an in-person one-on-one meeting in Kushner's New York office. During that meeting, Symes told Kushner that the best way to handle foreign policy issues of the Trump campaign would be to organize an advisory group of experts to meet with candidate Trump and develop a foreign policy approach that was consistent with Trump's voice. Symes believed that Kushner was receptive to that suggestion. Symes also had contact with other officials associated with the Trump campaign regarding the campaign's foreign policy positions. For example, on June 17, 2016, Symes sent J.D. Gordon an email with, quote, a memo to Senator Sessions that we discussed at our recent meeting, end quote, and asked Gordon to both read it and share it with Sessions, page 105. So it's the Mueller report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. We're broadcasting live today, live from, well, I just said that, yeah, from RealTalk910.com and Real Talk 910, AM 910 here in San Francisco. If you want to say hi to them, it's at Real Talk 910 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And it streams on the iHeartRadio app. This show and this station all the time, Progressive Radio, right here in San Francisco. Really worth checking out. Tonight I'll be in Berkeley at the First Church, an event that the Booksmith will be bringing some books, and I'll be talking about my new book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. Friday, we'll be in Darien, in the Chicago suburb of Darien, at Frugal Muse Bookstore, and Saturday in Minneapolis, actually in St. Paul, at Next Chapter Booksellers, formerly known as Common Good Books. So that's what's up. Our topics for the day, we're going to get into this question of how do we stop Donald Trump from essentially raping humanity? And I will explain that phrase. Is America facing a crisis of mental illness right now as a consequence of Donald Trump being in the White House for 2.5 years? Beto O'Rourke has proposed a new war tax as part of the Veterans Health Care Plan, or a Veterans Care Plan. I think this is brilliant, and we can kick that around. That's going to be in our second hour. And an 11-year-old hacked an election Friday and changed the results in Florida. Why are Americans pretending that our elections are safe? We'll get into that in our second hour. In our third hour, Dr. Justin Frank is going to be with us, the psychiatrist from George Washington University Medical School. And he has some new thoughts on Donald Trump. And we can also talk with him about the question that we're starting off here with, is how do we stop Donald Trump from raping humanity? And is America facing a mental health crisis, a mental illness crisis right now as a consequence of the Trump regime? When I was in Los Angeles, an acquaintance of mine, somebody I've known for some years, who's in the news business, and I'm not going to name, he made a comment to me that he's feeling so stressed by Trump, he feels like he has to check his phone every half hour and make sure that Trump hasn't started a war. And and in the news business, it's just, it's making him crazy. And he was asking for suggestions to de-stress. It's like, should I start meditating? I mean, how do I deal with this? And, my response was, we have to examine essentially the stories we're telling ourselves about what all this means. In other words, the internal dialogue we have. If Trump goes off and is nuts on something like he did this morning with Iran, then our internal response, well, yeah, that might trigger World War III, and that might be the end of humanity, and I suppose that's a better way to die than a long, prolonged cancer. That's a pretty grim story to be telling yourself. Or alternatively, the one I tell myself is this country's been to hell and back. We fought World War II, we fought the fascists, we fought the Nazis. We had a civil war, and we made it through that. We ended slavery, we enfranchised women. We had a horrible Revolutionary War that started the country. We have not, in my opinion, yet reconciled ourselves to either slavery nor the genocide of Native Americans. But, hey, hope springs eternal. That's one thought. But, if you're struggling with this, and you have suggestions on how to cope with it, or you've discovered some great way to cope with Trump. The other way, in my experience, to cope with the insanity of Donald Trump is to get active. It's amazing how therapeutic it is to feel like you're having an impact, like you're doing something worthwhile. Even if you're just waking up your next door neighbor, your best friend, your brother, sister, mother, father, child, old college roommate, somebody at work in the next cubicle. Even just that, this is therapy. This is how we have to deal with the age of Trump. And action, at the end of every show, I say, don't forget, democracy begins with you. It's not a spectator sport. You've got to get out there and get active, tag your it. I mean, that's how I've been ending my show for 15 years. And I do it not just because, hey, it sounds kind of cute or whatever like that, but because it's really true. One of the most effective ways to just deal with the anxiety, the stress, the oh my God, what's going on of Donald Trump is to do something about it. And I think, all those women who came out after the inauguration with the pussy hats on, the pink hats, this is great stuff. This is not only how we take back our country, but it's also how we take back our sanity, in my opinion. But, Trump today, he just flipped out again. Iran didn't get the memo from Kim Jong-un, right? Or from Saudi Arabia. If you want to have a good relationship with the United States, and let me just say this, speaking, I'm sure that Mr. Rouhani, President Rouhani, already knows this, and and Foreign Minister Zarif, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, already knows this. But this is a message for the Ayatollahs in Iran, for the Supreme Ayatollah and all of his buddies. What you all need to do is create some kind of a giant award for Donald Trump as best president ever. And you need to write him a letter saying, "Dear Donald, you've done such a great job in the United States and great work on keeping people out at your southern border. We have strong protection for our borders. We understand that. And we think that you are the best president ever." Signed, Love, the Ayatollah, and printed on a big piece of parchment, with some scroll work around the edge like an old illuminated manuscript, and mail that off by courier to Donald Trump the same way that Kim Jong-un does it. I mean, you've got Kim, who actually has nuclear weapons, who's actually testing nuclear weapons, who's got, now we know, missiles, high accuracy ballistic missiles and things. He's violating every treaty that there ever was, and more or less. And yet Trump is like, oh, he's a wonderful man. So Ayatollahs, take a lesson. Continuing on the Trump thing, I've got so much here. E. Jean Carroll has accused him of rape. We talked about this yesterday on the program in the context of how little media coverage it's getting. Now, the head guy at the New York Times in an interview yesterday admitted that they blew it. It really needs to be at the top of the front page. But Trump comes out and says that he would never rape her because she's not his type. Which raises the question, and again, I don't know why the media, can you imagine if Obama had said, I'd never rape her, she's not my type. Well, what type do you rape, Donald? Really? Is it, of the other 20 or so women who have claimed that you've raped them, which one? Pick one out. Tell us. We'd like to know. This is just mind-boggling. And then on top of that, we have the reality of Trump's America. Eugene Robinson wrote a great piece about this. He says, Donald Trump's immigration policy has crossed the line from gratuitous cruelty to flat-out sadism. Perhaps he enjoys seeing innocent children warehoused in filth and squalor. Perhaps he thinks that's what America is all about. Is he right, Trump supporters? Is he right, Republicans in Congress? Hey, if you're a Trump supporter and listening to the show, is Donald Trump right about, torturing children like this, essentially? If a regular parent, if you or me, had made one of our children sleep on a cement floor in the basement, kept the lights on 24/7, and refused to give that child a toothbrush, soap, blankets, bedding, or fresh clothing, we'd be in jail for child abuse, and our kid would be in foster care, just like that. But Donald Trump, he's doing this. I think he actually likes the cruelty. I think this man is literally a sadist. Puerto Rico, still waiting on approved emergency food aid. Congress passed this. Trump signed it. Or maybe it was Obama. It had to be Trump. It had to be Trump because the hurricane happened. And, Bernie Sanders is out like, why are you holding this money back? This is nuts. Trump has failed us on the climate crisis, on the war hawking in Iran, on inequality, on a housing crisis, on economic issues, the economic crisis, on women's issues, and it could get worse.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And keep in mind, Anne Frank, as Nate pointed out to me yesterday, wasn't gassed. She died of typhus due to poor sanitation in a camp, just like the Trump camps. So, I guess my first question is, have any of your friends come to you and said, I don't know what to do, I'm freaked out? Are you hearing from people that they are freaked out by the Trump camps or by any other part of Donald Trump's behavior, by his raping women, by his being a con man, by look at the Trump University. I mean, this is pretty mind-boggling. Trump University, he had to pay a $25 million fine for fraud. The guy's a convicted grifter, a convicted fraudster. People convicted of fraud, that's, literally we call them grifters. They're hustlers. This is the president of the United States. Well, he's at least the guy sitting in the White House. He lost by 3 million votes, as we all know. But have you had friends confide to you that they're having a problem with this? Are you hearing from people that they're in crisis? Give us a call, 202-808-9925. I just find this whole thing just astonishing that Donald Trump is so far getting away with all this. And, what can we do? Well, obviously we need to vote him out. Obviously the 80th Democrat now has called for, what do you call it? An impeachment hearing. Not impeachment, but impeachment hearing. They're two different things. So we now have the 80th Democrat saying, yeah, let's have an impeachment hearing. It seems to me like all 200 and whatever it is, 218 or whatever, however many Democrats, 220 I think we have in the House of Representatives, it seems to me like all of them should be calling for impeachment hearings. Shouldn't they? I mean, how do you get this guy out of office? I mean, we are like literally on the edge of World War III. It's mind-boggling. Deb in Saginaw, Michigan. Hey, Deb, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to make a comment about when you were talking about, the how Americans are feeling like with the, like mental disabilities or depression or anxiety going on in America.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I recently watched a movie that I don't know if you're familiar with. It's called Side Effects. And there was a quote in the movie, and I'd like to share it with you and your listeners and see what you guys think about this. But the quote is, depression is the inability to construct a future.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's what's going... Go ahead.
Let me explain something about that to you. This is something that I learned in my training as an NLP practitioner and trainer. Most people, if you ask them, just ask them, say, where is your future? And literally point to it. And they will point in front of themselves. Typically, they'll point in front of themselves. Some people will point up and to the right. Some people will point up and to the left. Occasionally, you'll get people who will point to the sides and things. But the few people, and I've been through this exercise with probably 100 people, the few people who say, I don't see a future, are always the people who are depressed. So that's brilliant, Deb. I'm going to riff about that a little bit on the break. I'm sorry we're running out of time here, but that is brilliant. Thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I was just talking to a listener, Deb, who was saying that depression is the inability to construct a future. And I was telling her the story that in my NLP training, there's this thing called timelines. And in fact, Louise is an expert at this. When she was a coach for business people with ADHD and family crises and things, she used to work with us all the time. And that is that if you ask a person, and you can just do this exercise yourself, where is your future? And most people point out in front of them and themselves. And then you say, where is your past? And most people point behind themselves. And some people have their future like off to the side. I actually had one person in a class one time, I have everybody in the class do this, who said that his future was behind him. And I said, well, just grab a hold of it and move it around in front of you. And all of a sudden his face just lit up and he was like, whoa, I see my future now. And some people have told me that their past is instead of being behind them, it's in front of them. They can see their past continuously. And those people tend to be filled with anxiety, or actually typically filled with regret or shame. And for them, you say, well, take that past that's in front of you and just swing it around behind you and just leave it back there. And you can literally do this. I mean, sometimes you have to do the exercise 4 or 5 times for it to stick. But she said, the depression is the inability to construct a future. And the few people that I have personally done this, I used to teach classes on this stuff, and you get 100 people in a room and everybody's doing it and you're having people share their experiences. The few people who would say, I can't see my future. I have no idea where my future is, I can't see it. You dig a little bit deeper, you almost always find that they are actually clinically depressed. They're experiencing depression and typically have for much of their lives. They never learned how to put a future in front of themselves. And there's a way to do that. You just, and there's, in fact, Google timeline therapy, NLP, and you'll find all the methods and techniques. But that was brilliant. That was just so brilliant. Kids dead so far in Donald Trump's concentration camps. Let's say their names, right? Jacqueline Cal McKean, 7 years old. Felipe Alonso Gomez, 8 years old. Marie Juarez, 20 months old, dead in Trump camps. And let's call, these concentration camps, we're calling them Trump camps. Carlos Hernandez Vasquez, 16, dead in the Trump camp. Wilmer Jose Ramirez Vasquez, 2 years old, dead in the Trump camp. Juan de Leon Gutierrez, 16, dead in the Trump camp. Now, there's another topic that I wanted to also bring up and get your thoughts and calls on, and that is the Billionaires Club has sent out a message. A letter that was published yesterday on the website medium.com calls for, quote, a moderate wealth tax on the fortunes of the richest 1/10 of the richest 1% of Americans, on us, end quote. And the letter is it's addressed to all of the candidates for president, specifically the Democrats. And it specifically refers to Elizabeth Warren's plan for a wealth tax. Now, a wealth tax is different than an income tax. An income tax is where your income, your paycheck, is taxed. A wealth tax is where your actual wealth is taxed. And this would include stocks, bonds, yachts, cars, art, things like that. And she thinks that this tax would, the estimate that Elizabeth Warren has put together, I shouldn't say she thinks, I mean, she's run the math on this. She's really, a great piece on her in the New York Times yesterday, by the way. And she said it would affect 75,000 families and it would raise $2.75 trillion over 10 years. The Federal Reserve found that just in the last 3 decades, this is a new report from the Federal Reserve, the wealthiest 1% of Americans saw their net worth grow by $21 trillion, while the wealth, this is what you own, this is not your paycheck, while the wealth of the bottom 50% fell by $900 billion. Where did it go? It was stolen, essentially, in my opinion. The richest 1%, 1/10 of 1% of Americans will pay 3.2% of their wealth in taxes this year, compared to 7.2% paid by the bottom 99%. To get that, I mean, this is because Reagan changed our tax laws, Trump doubled down, or George W. Bush doubled down on it, and then Donald Trump tripled down on it, right? So the very richest of Americans, the ones who, some of them just signed this letter, including, I think her name is Abigail Disney, the heir to the Disney fortune, saying, yes, tax my wealth, not just my paycheck, but my wealth. Because the taxes paid this year will equal 3.2% of the wealth of the richest 1/10 of Americans, but 7% of the wealth of the bottom 99%. In fact, a quote from this study: the next dollar of new tax revenue should come from the most financially fortunate, not from middle income and lower income Americans. Oh, this is from the letter from the billionaires. And a wealth tax like this could help deal with problems like the lack of childcare, educational debt, the opioid crisis, the climate crisis, all kinds of cool stuff. By the way, Corey, the guy who's the program director here at AM 910, does his own podcast. It's called The Dumpster Fire. It's on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. And he calls it The Dumpster Fire because it's all about the dumpster fire that's the Trump administration. On Twitter, he's The DF Show, as in dumpster fire, The DF Show on Twitter. And I'm going to have to go over there and follow him during the break. And it's all about how Trump and his administration handles any situation. It's always a dumpster fire. So it's like, this is amazing. People all over the country are, they're starting podcasts, as Corey has done with the Dumpster Fire podcast. It is, people starting blogs, people participating in interactive forums like, from Democratic Underground to Daily Kos to, commenting on stories over at Alternate and Common Dreams and things like that. To going door to door. Like I said, this is therapy. The best therapy, and literally ask any psychologist, psychiatrist, or psychotherapist, the best therapy for a feeling of essentially impotence, a feeling of the inability to accomplish something, a feeling of powerlessness, a feeling that the world is spinning out of control and there's nothing you can do about it. The best therapy for that is to get active, to get out there. The old tag you're it, to do something. So start thinking about, what could I do?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You've got Indivisible, you've got Move On, you've got Our Revolution. There's all kinds of great groups out there that you can, the Democratic Party that you can participate with.
It's the Mueller Report. We're on page 102. This is about campaign work that Carter Page did for the Trump campaign. Following the convention, Page's trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russia foreign policy drew the media's attention and began to generate substantial press coverage. The campaign responded by distancing itself from Page, describing him as a, quote, informal foreign policy advisor who did not speak for Mr. Trump or the campaign, end quote. On September 23, 2016, Yahoo News reported that U.S. intelligence officials were investigating whether Page had opened private communications with senior Russian officials to discuss U.S. sanctions policy under a possible Trump administration. A campaign spokesman told Yahoo News that Page had no role in the campaign and that the campaign was not aware of any of his activities, past or present. On September 24, 2016, Page was formally removed from the campaign. Although Page had been removed from the campaign after the election, he sought a position in the Trump administration. On November 14, 2016, he submitted an application to the transition team that inflated his credentials and experiences, stating that in his capacity as a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor, he had met with top world leaders and effectively responded to diplomatic outreach efforts from senior government officials in Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. We're now on page 103. Page received no response from the transition team. When Page took a personal trip to Moscow in December 2016, he met again with at least one Russian government official. That interaction and a discussion of the December trip are set forth in Volume 1, Section 4. Number 4, Dimitri Simes and the Center for the National Interest. Members of the Trump campaign interacted on several occasions with the Center for the National Interest, CNI, principally through its president and chief executive officer, Dimitri Simes. CNI is a think tank with expertise in and connections to the Russian government. Symes was born in the former Soviet Union and immigrated to the United States in the 1970s. In April 2016, candidate Trump delivered his first speech on foreign policy and national security at an event hosted by the National Interest, a publication affiliated with CNI. Then Senator Jeff Sessions and Russian Ambassador Kislyak both attended the event, and as a result, it gained some attention in relation to Sessions' confirmation hearings to become Attorney General. Sessions had various other contacts with CNI during the campaign period on foreign policy matters, including Russia. Jared Kushner also interacted with Symes about Russian issues during the campaign. The investigation did not identify evidence that the campaign passed or received any messages to or from the Russian government through CNI or Symes. Subtitle A, CNI and Dimitri Symes connect with the Trump campaign. CNI is a Washington-based nonprofit organization that grew out of a center founded by former President Richard Nixon. CNI describes itself, quote, as a voice for strategic realism in U.S. foreign policy, end quote, and publishes a bi-monthly foreign policy magazine, The National Interest. CNI is overseen by a board of directors and an advisory council that is largely honorary and whose members at the relevant time included Sessions, who served as an advisor to candidate Trump on national security and foreign policy issues. Dimitri Symes is president and CEO of CNI and the publisher and CEO of The National Interest. Symes was born in the former Soviet Union, emigrated to the United States in the early 1970s, and joined CNI's predecessor after working at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Symes personally has many contacts with former and current Russian government officials, as does CNI collectively. As CNI stated when seeking a grant from the Carnegie Corporation in 2015, CNI has, quote, unparalleled access to Russian officials and politicians among Washington think tanks, end quote, in part because CNI has arranged for U.S. delegations to visit Russia and for Russian delegations to visit the United States as part of a so-called, Track 2 diplomatic effort. On March 14, 2016, CNI board member Richard Plepfer organized a luncheon for CNI and its honorary chairman, Henry Kissinger, at the Time Warner Building in New York. The idea behind the event was to generate interest in CNI's work and recruit new board members for CNI. Along with Symes, attendees at the event included Jared Kushner, son-in-law of candidate Trump. Kushner told the office, that's the special prosecutor, the Mueller office, that the event came at a time when the Trump campaign was having trouble securing support from experienced foreign policy professionals, and that as a result, he decided to seek Symes' assistance during the March 14th event. Symes and Kushner spoke again on March 24th, 2016 on the telephone, 3 days after Trump had publicly named the team of foreign policy advisors that had been put together on short notice. On March 31st, 2016, Symes and Kushner had an in-person one-on-one meeting in Kushner's New York office. During that meeting, Symes told Kushner that the best way to handle foreign policy issues of the Trump campaign would be to organize an advisory group of experts to meet with candidate Trump and develop a foreign policy approach that was consistent with Trump's voice. Symes believed that Kushner was receptive to that suggestion. Symes also had contact with other officials associated with the Trump campaign regarding the campaign's foreign policy positions. For example, on June 17, 2016, Symes sent J.D. Gordon an email with, quote, a memo to Senator Sessions that we discussed at our recent meeting, end quote, and asked Gordon to both read it and share it with Sessions, page 105. So it's the Mueller report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com.
And tonight I am in Berkeley at the First Church on Channing Way, 2345 Channing Way, there's a Facebook link and all this kind of stuff for tickets and the event and all that kind of stuff on our website at thomhartmann.com. Friday I'll be in Chicago and Darien at Frugal Muse Bookstore, and Saturday in Minneapolis, actually in St. Paul at New Chapter Booksellers, formerly known as Common Good Books. So Let's get into some of your thoughts here. Margie in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. Margie, what's on your mind today?
Hi. This is very disturbing. First of all,
What is?
lightsforliberty.org is planning national protests for July 12th. Mm-hmm. You can sign up for them on their website. I just tried to share the links to their website on Facebook, and Facebook is blocking all attempts to share the website for these protests.
Well,
I have been
you may try.
I have been denied 3 times. How I did it, got around the workaround, was wrote out the website and put voteout.org as opposed to putting the period. But they are not allowing a link to the website to be posted on Facebook.
Right. Margie, it may not be that it has to do with the protest. It may just be Facebook works as its own little empire. It's like a walled fortress, and they do not like you to have links on there that go outside of Facebook. And so that, try putting...
I've linked stuff to Facebook all the time, from newspaper
really?
articles, New York. I link Washington Post articles, New York Times, LA Times. I can link anything, all kinds of news articles on Facebook. This is the first time. Well, other than I put a link on for an article by Dean Obeidallah that had the words white terrorists. That was blocked.
Yeah, well, I get that. They're you know. So it may not be the link, Margie. It might be the language around the link. If you're using words like fascist and stuff like that, you know, they're actually trying to clean up their act. You know, both Facebook and Twitter, to some extent, in weird ways, and YouTube as well. So you may just try, you know, posting it without any kind of inflammatory language, avoid any adjectives at all, and see what happens.
That's what I did. I don't use any inflammatory language. Literally, I said, these protests, lightsforliberty.org, and it was flagged. And it was blocked.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, they do have, you know, Facebook does have a bunch of right-wingers in addition to, you know, people who are just kind of, you know, normal people looking at these things. And one of the groups, I can't remember if it was Facebook, YouTube, or Google, one of them even has, you know, the Daily Caller, which is the Koch brothers-funded right-wing website, among others, on their advisory board. So, Marjorie, I can't help you with that, but give it a plug again. What's the URL?
lightsforliberty.org. The protests are being planned for July 12th. You can register groups at lightsforliberty.org. You can find protests that are already, it's broken down state by state.
That's great. Margie, I have to say to our listeners, I have never heard of this website, and it may be, if it's possible it's being blocked because it's a website out of Russia, or it's a website that's a scam website, although, you know, I'll take your word for it that you think it's solid and it's credible. But, you know, this isn't an endorsement from this program, I guess is what I'm saying. Margie, thanks for the call. Jill in Long Beach, California. Hey, Jill, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Hi, can you hear me?
No, it's very, very faint.
How about now? Can you hear me?
That's much better. What's up?
Just two quick things. The first thing is people have started talking to me that have never said anything political to me, like out of the blue. My friend just said to me yesterday, I said, we need to talk and have coffee sometimes. And she said, I'm just going to say one thing. I can't stand what Trump is doing to these children at the border. And she's never said anything political to me before. And another friend who's never been political. So the thing with the children is really, really getting to people now. So, you know, I've never had them say anything to me about Trump before, ever. And the second thing I wanted to talk about activism, just real quick. The only way that anything progressive on a major progressive thing has ever been passed in the United States has been with national organization, civil rights, women's rights. There needs to be national organization and marches in the street to stop like climate change, around the immigration issue.
Yeah.
And I can take my answer offline if you what your thoughts are about that, if you know anything about that and how to get into that. Because everything that's ever been done, progressively, big things, has been cause of people taking to the street in a national organized manner. So that was my.
Yeah.
Those are my.
No, there are great groups out there. If you're just kind of broadly anti-Trump, you've got indivisible.org, you've got moveon.org, you've got ourrevolution.com, I believe it is. There's, among others, there's Democracy for America. I mean, there's just a bunch of very, very good groups out there that are doing great work. And so, not to mention the Democratic Party, but in terms of organizing groups, I agree with you, Jill. And I would track down or find a good group that you think is close to your heart, that represents your values, and see what they're up to. This is a time for us to really be searching out these groups and participating as much as we possibly can. Brian in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Brian, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Hey, thanks. You signed a book for me the other night in Seattle. I was the guy that goes to Cuba a lot. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You used to run the tours there until Trump shut it down, which is such a bummer.
But,
yeah. So what's up?
But I was calling because, I heard you reading the Mueller report, in the commercial break, and you heard about the play that Lithgow and Alyssa Milano and some others have just done or are about to do?
I heard that there was a performance yesterday, I don't know if it was on the internet or on TV, of some fairly famous people out of Hollywood who were basically performing the Mueller report, which is something I've been calling for on the air for weeks, and I'm glad to see. I have no idea if they heard me, but I'm glad to see it happening. And I did, but I didn't see it.
Okay, me neither. That's not why I called. Sorry, I just thought of it because you were talking about. But I called because when you were first talking. So I've gone to see a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever, twice now because of I got family issues and my work is volatile. But she asked me, so why are you here? And I said, well, I'm not handling this very well. Trump is daily. I'm checking my phone. What did he do? Like you said, and I've gone twice now, and I haven't gone again yet because her ultimate sort of response was, and I'm not faulting her per se, but the ultimate response was like, get a hobby and turn off the news and go for a walk and focus on other things.
Geez.
But to me, if for some reasons you're depressed or scared or sad or whatever, that works. But in this case, all the nasty, horrible stuff is still happening, even if I turn off the news and go, don't pay attention. And that scares the heck out of me. So I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of strategies. As I mentioned earlier in the hour, get active. That's incredibly therapeutic. I mean, to the best of my, this is the story of my life. When I see something I'm outraged about, I try to do something about it. That makes you feel so much better. Number one. Number two, construct a positive future for yourself and put it out in front of yourself. And number three, sometimes her advice is good. Louise and I have some friends who have a new baby. And Louise was talking with them a couple of days ago about, she brought up the topic of Trump, and they just said, we don't want to hear about it. We have decided, we're going to vote Democratic, which is one of the more important things we can do, and we'll support progressive candidates. But we've just stopped watching the news because we've got this year-old baby, and we really want to focus all our attention on her. And so, for some people can do that. Some people can't. Dale Carnegie calls it in his book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, which is buying that book and reading that book is probably, in terms of value, about as good as 2 or 3 sessions with a good therapist. Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. It was written back in the 1930s, and it's still one of the very best books that's ever been written on psychology and coping. And he calls it living in day-tight compartments. And he tells a story around it. And basically it's that, you just say, okay, today I'm going to do the best I can with today, and I'm not going to worry about tomorrow, and I'm not going to wallow in regret about the past. I will learn from my past, and the shame or guilt or whatever, or just disappointment in our past. We'll just put that behind you. It doesn't cease to exist. We can learn from it, but let's put a positive future in front of us. But for today, and this is sort of the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. One day at a time. Live in a day-tight compartment. It's a really useful thing. Brian, thank you for the call. And it was great meeting you in Seattle. I remember it well. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're broadcasting live from Real Talk 910, realtalk910.com, Real Talk 910 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And welcome back. Mark, watching Free Speech TV in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Well, did you happen to catch Democracy Now! Yesterday?
I did not. I've been on the road. I haven't been able to catch pretty much any media other than the print stuff.
They had a lady attorney, Warren Binford, on that had visited one of the concentration camps outside of El Paso.
I've read some of her testimony. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
And she was actually able to talk to the children,
right,
and get touched and directly. And this is what they did. You happen to catch what they're feeding them?
Mm-hmm. It's Kool-Aid and crap.
Kool-Aid?
Or crap food, junk food. They get a burrito in the evening. It's all processed food, which is poison for adults, for that matter. It's also poison for children. No fresh food at all.
So I called my Congresswoman, McMorris Rogers, which is almost a waste of time, but I have to do it to feel better. Yeah. And I confronted them with the fact that they're not feeding the children right, they're not clothing them right, they're not housing them properly. And the rebuttal was that the Democrats are blocking funding that they need so they can do this, and they have run out of stuff. That's why this is happening.
Yeah, that's a lie.
Well, yeah, I know that. And I told them, I said,
that's
no,
an absolute lie. We are paying $750 a day per child to have these children kept in dog cages.
It's ridiculous. And I told the person on the phone flat out, I said, no, don't pull that with me. I'm not one of your ignorant voters. I know what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, the other rebuttal, Mark, is if Donald Trump can grab $5 billion out of the defense budget and reallocate it to use to build his wall, he can certainly find money someplace to get soap and clean diapers for little children and a mattress so that they're not sleeping on a concrete floor. Don't assume I'm an idiot.
Yeah, here's what really scares me. Okay, I go to the gym and I also been going to a doctor or a podiatrist, and there's a black aide, about 60 years old, right around my age, and he's a Trump supporter. And then there's another gentleman about 66 I see at the gym that's an avid Trump supporter. And when I bring this stuff up, it has no effect.
Right.
They're like, the parents shouldn't have brought him here. I'm like, they're innocent children. Now, the parents
These are people who've been brainwashed. They literally have been brainwashed. They are victims of Fox News and right-wing hate radio, and there's no other way to say it. And we have to have compassion for them. And if they are true believers, if they're not willing to listen, then we just have to stop talking politics to them. There's you're not going to change their minds, frankly.
No,
in fact, very often what happens is you cause them to dig in even harder, because if you give them an argument, they'll go back to their right-wing sources to find the counter argument, and it's like friends don't talk Trump with friends, I guess, unless they're willing to talk to each other. But there's just it's like trying to talk somebody out of a cult. It's like trying to tell a Scientologist that L. Ron Hubbard was just a science fiction writer and the whole thing's a scam.
And they both consider themselves like evangelical Christians.
Yeah. Well, tell them to read the book of Matthew. Mark, thank you so much. Great to hear from you. What an amazing story. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, broadcasting live from San Francisco. I'll be in Berkeley tonight, and if you're in the neighborhood, I hope to see you. Stick around. And let's see here, Kenneth in Seattle. Hey, Kenneth, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi. I have a suggestion of something that could be done, but I don't know how to go about it. This is a situation. As everybody knows, Trump called for a strike against Iran and then called it back. Oh, good, he called it back. The thing is, he could do it again, and we can't rely on dumb luck second time. This is my suggestion, but again, I don't know how to go about it. We or somebody or some groups of somebodies should appeal to the Pentagon itself to ignore any such order. And there's legal cause to ignore it. It's because the president doesn't have the right to declare war, and an act declares the fact. I'm aware that it goes at least as far back as Truman, as doing it anyway with his clever word game of calling the Korean War the Korean War a police action. But I'm also aware
and LBJ did the same thing in Vietnam.
Yes, same thing, right. I'm also aware of the following quick riddle. If you call a tail a leg, how many legs does a dog have? The answer is 4, because calling a tail a leg doesn't make it one. So
I love it.
Good.
I love it.
Thank you.
Kenneth, to your point, there really is no way to lobby the Pentagon, and in some ways that's a good thing. But the Pentagon is like its own little insular thing, and if you've ever gotten to really know people well who are like career military, there's even this. It's almost like police officers. There's a sense of we are us, and all the civilians are them. But the one thing that you can do. Right now, the Democrats are trying to rewrite the defense appropriation bill. I've talked about this before. The founders were very worried about our having a permanent army during times of peace, that they could stage a military coup and take over the country. And so they wrote into Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that the Army may only be funded for 2 years, period. And that's still in the Constitution, and that is still the highest law of the land. That the Army can only be funded for 2 years. And if Congress doesn't appropriate the funds, the Army has to shut down and go away. And so that's a bill that has to pass. And the Democrats are trying to write into that defense appropriation bill that Trump may not use any of this money appropriated to attack Iran. And, we'll see. The other thing is that Trump is using, he's been lying about there being al-Qaeda in Iran. Now, al-Qaeda is a Sunni religious and political and terrorist organization that evolved out of the Wahhabist movement out of Saudi Arabia, and ISIS evolved out of al-Qaeda. And Iran not only has no al-Qaeda, they hate al-Qaeda. But Trump is lying. I don't know if you caught this last week. He and Pence and Pompeo, all three of them are lying, saying that Iran has an alliance with al-Qaeda. Why? Because after 2001, Congress got around the war powers, outlined in the Constitution. This is only Congress can declare war. So Congress essentially declared war against al-Qaeda. And they said that the president has the authority, without coming back to Congress, to attack al-Qaeda anywhere in the world. And that's why, and that was the authority that both George W. Bush and Barack Obama used to go after Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. It's just been a whole bunch of these things, right? So Trump is trying to use that AUMF from 2001 to go after Iran, and it's as far away from the intention as possible, but that needs to get rewritten. So my suggestion, Kenneth, and thank you so much for the call, would be to call your members of Congress, be they Democrats or Republicans, and say it's time to kill the 2001 AUMF, the authorization to use military forces, trying to turn that thing off, shut it down, repeal it, number one. And number two, in the upcoming defense appropriations bill, which they are going to be negotiating over the next month or two, because it has to be passed by October 1st, in this defense appropriation bill, please put a provision in there that says that Trump cannot use military funds to go after Iran. Jeanette in Richland Center, Wisconsin. Hey, Jeanette, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I am just totally devastated by lawyers going into Clint, Texas, and telling of the deplorable situations there where 8 and 10-year-olds were asked to take care of diaper babies. Now, what I'm hearing from Pence, he comes on like a zombie on Jake Tapper. And when Tapper asks him, don't you have responsibility? Well, Pence says the responsibility is to fix these immigration laws. And then Pence said he hadn't been in retention centers for 2 months, but they were down in Miami at this rally. Were not all these Republicans? And how far is Homestead from there? And there's money in this. We have John Kelly, who was the national advisor to Trump, now is a director of one of the largest companies for caging and holding and deterrent, and it's a Caliburn company.
Yeah, and we're paying these companies $750
for that.
We're paying these companies $750 per child per day to keep them in dog kennels. I'm absolutely with you, Jeanette. It is an outrage. It is an absolute screaming outrage, and we all need to be calling our members of Congress. And we had a caller earlier who said that he called Kathy McMorris Rogers' office, the Republican member of Congress, and said, I'm horrified by what's going on in the Trump camps. And the person who answered the phone said, well, that's happening. The kids can't have soap because the Democrats won't appropriate the money. That is a flat-out lie. And when you call your Republican, if they try to say that lie to you, just the response is, well, Trump was able to find $5 billion to fund his border wall that Congress never appropriated. Why can't he find $5,000 to buy soap for kids? I'm not buying it. Don't try your lies on me. Curtis in Santa Maria, California. Hey, Curtis, what's on your mind today? Oh, hey, Curtis, let me put you on hold. I just realized I have 10 seconds until a break. So I'll pick your call up in the next hour. But, it just really would be fair to give you, there we go, to give you those last 10 seconds. Check out Corey's podcast. It's called The Dumpster Fire. It's on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. And his Twitter handle, The DF Show on Twitter. It's all about how Trump and his administration handles any situation. Yep. It's a dumpster fire. We're broadcasting live from Real Talk 910 AM in San Francisco.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
It's the Mueller report. We're on page 105. He's talking about Dimitri Simes and the Center for the National Interest, a foreign policy think tank that has good contacts with Russia, and how Kushner and Jeff Sessions were involved with this fellow, Dimitri Simes. The memorandum proposed building a small and carefully selected group of experts to assist Jeff Sessions with the campaign, operating under the assumption that Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on national security and foreign policy issues. The memorandum outlined key issues for the campaign, including, quote, a new beginning with Russia. B, National Interest is the magazine of CNI, hosts a foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel. During their March 24th phone call and their March 31st in-person meeting, Simes and Kushner discussed the possibility of CNI hosting a foreign policy speech by candidate Trump.
Following these conversations, Symes agreed that he and others associated with CNI would provide behind-the-scenes input on the substance of the foreign policy speech, and the CNI officials would coordinate the logistics of the speech with Sessions and his staff, including Sessions' chief of staff, Rick Dearborn. In mid-April 2016, Kushner put Symes in contact with senior policy advisor Stephen Miller and forwarded to Symes an outline of the foreign policy speech that Miller had prepared. Symes sent back to the campaign bullet points with ideas for the speech that he had drafted with CNI Executive Director Paul Saunders and board member Richard Burt. Symes received subsequent draft outlines from Miller, and he and Saunders spoke to Miller by phone about substantive changes to the speech. It is not clear, however, whether CNI officials received an actual draft of the speech for comment. While Saunders recalled having received an actual draft, Symes did not, and the emails that CNI produced to this office do not contain such a draft. After board members expressed concern to Symes that CNI's hosting the speech could be perceived as an endorsement of a particular candidate, CNI decided to have its publication, The National Interest, serve as the host, and to have the event at the National Press Club. Kushner later requested that the event be moved to the Mayflower Hotel, which was another venue that Symes had mentioned during initial discussions with the campaign, in order to address concerns about security and capacity. On April 25, 2016, Saunders booked event rooms at the Mayflower to host both the speech and a VIP reception that was to be held beforehand. Saunders understood that the reception, at which invitees would have a chance to meet candidate Trump, would be a small event. Saunders decided who would attend by looking at the list of CNI invitees to the speech itself, and then choosing a subset for the reception. CNI's invitees to the reception included Sessions and Kislyak. The week before the speech, Symes had informed Kislyak that he would be invited to the speech and that he would have the opportunity to meet Trump. When the pre-speech reception began on April 27th, the receiving line was quickly organized so that attendees could meet Trump. Sessions first stood next to Trump to introduce him to the members of Congress who were in attendance. After those members had been introduced, Symes stood next to Trump and introduced him to the CNI invitees in attendance, including Kislyak. Symes perceived the introduction to be positive and friendly, but thought it clear that Kislyak and Trump had just met for the first time. Kislyak also met Kushner during the pre-speech reception. The two shook hands and chatted for a minute or two, during which Kushner recalled Kislyak saying, "We like what your candidate is saying. It's refreshing." Several public reports state that, in addition to speaking with Kushner at the pre-speech reception, Kislyak also met or conversed with Sessions at that time. Sessions stated to investigators, however, that he did not remember any such conversation. Nor did anyone else affiliated with CNI or the National Interest specifically recall a conversation or meeting between Sessions and Kislyak at the pre-speech reception. It appears that if a conversation occurred at the pre-speech reception, it was a brief one conducted in public view, similar to the exchange between Kushner and Kislyak. The office found no evidence that Kislyak conversed with either Trump or Sessions after the speech or would have had an opportunity to do so. Symes, for example, did not recall seeing Kislyak at the post-speech luncheon, and the only witness who accounted for Sessions' whereabouts stated that Sessions may have spoken to the press after the event, but then departed for Capitol Hill. Saunders recalled, based in part on a food-related request he received from a campaign staff member, that Trump left the hotel a few minutes after the speech to go to the airport. Item subset C, Jeff Sessions' post-speech interactions with CNI. In the wake of Sessions' confirmation hearings as Attorney General, questions arose about whether Sessions' campaign period interactions with CNI, apart from the Mayflower speech, included any additional meetings with Ambassador Kislyak or involved Russian-related matters. With respect to Kislyak contacts, on May 23, 2016, Sessions attended CNI's Distinguished Service Award dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. Sessions attended a pre-dinner reception and was seated at one of two head tables for the event. A seating chart prepared by Saunders indicated that Sessions was scheduled to be seated next to Kislyak, who appears to have responded to the invitation by indicating he would attend the event. Sessions, however, did not remember seeing, speaking with, or sitting next to Kislyak at the dinner. Although CNI board member Charles Boyd said he may have seen Kislyak at the dinner, Symes, Saunders, and Jacob Heilbrunn, editor of the National Interest, all had no recollection of seeing Kislyak at the May 23rd event. Kislyak also does not appear in any of the photos from the event that the office obtained. In the summer of 2016, CNI organized at least two dinners in Washington, D.C. for Sessions to meet with experienced foreign policy professionals. It's the Mueller Report.
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Samacharov, well, I knew this. It's page 117 of the Mueller Report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. We're broadcasting live today from San Francisco, Real Talk 910, our iHeart affiliate here in San Francisco. You can listen to them online at realtalk910.com. That's also their Twitter handle, realtalk910, Instagram, Facebook, streaming on the iHeart Radio app. Tonight I'll be in Berkeley at the First Church, which is 2345 Channing Way. And I hope to see you there. There is a Facebook page for tickets, and Hidden History of Guns. Well, the whole, and you can find it on our website at thomhartmann.com. All the links and all that kind of stuff. We have been talking about Donald Trump actually essentially raping humanity. That this man, you know, when he says, "Oh, I didn't rape," what was her name, E. Jean Carroll, because, quote, she's not my type. Well, so he's saying he has a type to rape. Men like that view not just women as objects. In my opinion, they view humans as objects. They view everything as objects. They think that they're the only real human being in the world, the one and only person who actually feels things and like that. I mean, this is called sociopathy. We're going to be talking in the next hour with Dr. Justin Frank specifically about this, the psychiatrist from George Washington University. And he's threatening, you know, Iran with obliteration. We've been talking about mental health. How do people cope with this? And I've suggested a bunch of coping strategies. I wanted to name, again, the children who have so far died in the Trump camps, the Trump concentration camps. Daryl Christabel Cordova Valley, 10 years old. 7-year-old Jacqueline Cal Makin, 8-year-old Felipe Alonso Gomez died in the Trump camp. 20-month-old baby Marie Juarez died in the Trump camps. Carlos Hernandez Vasquez, a 16-year-old, died in the Trump camps. A 2-year-old Wilmer Jose Ramirez Vasquez died in the Trump concentration camps. Juan de Leon Gutierrez, 16 years old, died in the Trump camps. Thousands of these children are now lost. We have no idea what happened to them. We don't know if they've been sold to people. We don't know if they've been adopted out. We don't know if they're in the hands of rings of child abusers and molesters. I mean, we just have no idea. And let's just, keep in mind, Anne Frank, the iconic victim of the Holocaust, she was not gassed. She was not, quote, killed by the Nazis. I mean, she died in the hands of the Nazis. She was killed by typhus because of poor sanitation at the camp. And now Trump has, in his concentration camps, he's got these kids sleeping in their own excrement for weeks at a time and eating junk food and Kool-Aid. And we're paying $750 per day per child to private prisons to keep these kids in dog kennels. where they're sleeping on concrete floors with a tinfoil blanket in the cold, with no blanket and no pillow, and they're crying, "Mom, I want," and the adults are not allowed to touch them. You know what happens to children when they don't get affection, when they're not held, when they're not hugged? This is the story of the Romanian orphanages, of the kids who, after Ceausescu was killed by his own people, the dictator of Romania. They found, because he had 10 years earlier, he had absolutely outlawed abortion nationwide in Romania, made it completely illegal. And the result of that was hundreds of thousands of unwanted babies. And they had to set up these huge state-run orphanages. And they would just have 100 babies in a giant room, each one in its own crib. And, they'd come through and feed them, and that was it. They got no affection, no touch. These children grew up without the inability to connect with people. Their intellect was stunted. Their ability to experience emotion was stunted. In some cases, they ended up essentially psychopaths as a result of this. It broke them. And that's what Trump is trying to do to these children. I really think this man loves the cruelty. I genuinely do. And it's one of the questions I want to put to Dr. Frank in the next hour. We've also talked about the wealth tax. We've got a group of billionaires and multimillionaires who have now come out and specifically endorsed Senator Elizabeth Warren's proposed tax on wealth that could raise a couple of $1 trillion. And this is there's 75,000 families in the United States who have so many hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that any of their money might be subject to this little tiny tax. And even at that, with these 75,000 mind-bogglingly wealthy families. I mean, people who live in a different world than you and I. They don't fly commercial, right? They don't. You never see these folks. They live in a separate world from us. And that Elizabeth Warren's tax would raise $2.75 trillion over the next decade. The daughter of the Disney fortune has come out and endorsed this, among others. So we've been talking about that over the last hour. I want to toss in a couple more topics here for this hour. Beto O'Rourke. This is really great. Beto O'Rourke has proposed a war tax. This is great. If you make less than $35,000 a year and nobody in your family is serving in the military, if the United States goes to any newly authorized war, if we go to war, now we're going to have to define what that means because we haven't declared a war since World War II. So, but I'm guessing he's got that figured out. A family making less than $35,000 a year would pay $25 a year. Now, those are the Trump voters, right? Hey, you're going to have to pay a tax if Trump declares a war. What? And if you're making more than $200,000 a year and nobody in your family is serving, you pay $1,000 a year. What do you think about that? And should Democrats deny any more funding for the border crisis? This is really becoming a challenge because as I mentioned, one of our callers talked about calling Kathy McMorris Rodgers' office. This was in the last hour. She said who's her member of Congress. And Kathy McMorris Rodgers, of course, is not just a Republican, but she's in the Republican leadership in the U.S. House of Representatives, one of the very few women in Congress who's actually a Republican. Tragically, must be just some kind of soulless person. But in any case, she called Rodgers' office and said, I'm really upset about the camps. And the woman who answered the phone said, well, that's because the Democrats won't appropriate money. And she was like, what, do you think I'm an idiot? Donald Trump can take money out of the Pentagon budget to build his wall. So there's money around. B, you don't need a congressional appropriation to pay for soap. You're already paying $750 a day per child to these private prison corporations that John Kelly's on the board of now to house children in dog cages. So, please call your members of Congress, and if it's a Republican and they try to give you this BS, respectfully, nicely, keep in mind the person answering the phone is not your member of Congress. And in many cases, they're just interns who are trying to get some experience on Capitol Hill so that they can, put it on their resume. They're generally very decent people and young people. So don't be nasty, but just say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. I know that Fox News is lying to me. So, how do the Democrats play this? Because they do need to reauthorize, humanitarian aid to the southwestern border. Congress is trying to get $4.5 billion But some of the Democrats, and this is splitting the Democratic caucus, some of them are concerned that the money will be used by Donald Trump to increase deportation raids and increase, tear more children from their families. And then finally, I wanted to let you know, the annual hacker convention is happening. And sure enough, last Friday, they built a replica, an absolute identical version of the Florida state election website. And an 11-year-old kid hacked into that website and took an election in which a Democrat won and turned it into an election in which a Republican won in 10 minutes. Actually, it was less than 10 minutes. It was 9 minutes and a few seconds. An 11-year-old hacked a replica of the Florida state election website. So, I mean, why, Nico Sell, the co-founder of the nonprofit Roots Asylum, who teaches children how to become hackers and helped organize the event, says an 11-year-old girl managed to make changes to the same Florida replica website in 15 minutes, tripling the number of votes found there. He said more than 30 children hacked a variety of similar state replica websites in under a half hour. And he says these are very accurate replicas of all the sites. This was on the PBS NewsHour on Sunday. He said these things should not be easy enough for an 8-year-old kid to hack within 30 minutes, which raises the question, why do we pretend that elections aren't being stolen? And why do we wonder? I'm hearing silence. Oh, I'm hearing silence because I'm on the air. Okay, I'm sorry. Dee in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Dee, what's on your mind?
Oh, hello, Tom. I'm just so happy that you are here at this time in this generation, because you create an opportunity for us to do critical thinking, which they pulled that out of our educational system during the Bush administration. However, I just want to say Trump donors are making $70 million a month on these kids. There are around 3,000 kids. This is just a kid.
No, it's more like 15,000 kids, actually, nationwide. The 3,000 number, I think, are the children who've been separated from their parents. Then there are kids who came over with aunts or uncles, people who are not their parents. There are a few of the older kids, 15, 16, 17, who came just on their own. Those children are also in detention camps. It's in the neighborhood of 13 to 15,000. Nobody actually knows for sure. But anyhow, back to you, Dee.
Basically, these nonprofit organizations, not nonprofit, we call
charitable organizations. Yeah.
Yes, they donated to the Trump administration, and they're being repaid back with multi-million dollars.
Oh, you're talking. Yeah, what you're saying is that the lobbyists and the companies that are running these private for-profit detention facilities, these concentration camps, they donated to Donald Trump. Just like the manufacturers of Zyklon gas. Now that's hyperbole, but we're in tight with the Hitler administration. But okay, let's set the hyperbole aside. These guys,
it's not going to change. There's too much money here. So Trump is making profit off of the destruction of kids. And these kids, when they cry, you do realize that they are being tortured. They are being drugged. Some of them are being strapped into chairs. I mean, if you go to the ACLU and some of these other websites that monitor what's going on, we're just seeing we're not even seeing the tip of what these kids are going through, as well as adults.
I believe you're right, Dee.
Again,
and by the way, they keep the lights on 24 hours a day. That's defined by the United Nations as torture.
We made them the other. So I don't see where are we as Americans? When we were wearing the hats, the pink hats, where are we as Americans to stand up in droves and say this should not happen during this time? I mean, we as a country call ourselves a Christian, pro-life Christian society. I mean, whatever the case is, but that's how we want to look at ourselves as. God is crying right now. You are not allowed to even call yourself a Christian with what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to take it there. Okay. Thank you.
No, this. I mean, who would Jesus detain, right? Who would Jesus detain? Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, what Mike Pence, Jesus said, suffer the little children to come on to me, which is archaic language. It means, allow them to. But I think that that Pence is taking that literally, make the little children suffer. I can't figure out another reason why a guy who calls himself a Christian would do something as reprehensible. Dee, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It is 19 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We're broadcasting live from San Francisco. So we've got a lot on the table, just to finish up my rant from the last break here. Here we have now 30 different children. I'm not talking about the detention camps now. I'm talking about at the hacker convention last week, DEF CON 26. I think it was in Vegas. It's the largest yearly hackers convention. And 30 different children hacked into replica websites in under a half hour for multiple states in the United States. And we are wondering, why is it that Mitch McConnell is refusing to allow legislation to pass that would secure the websites of the elections, particularly in red states? Most of the blue states have locked down their websites, but the red state, Georgia, they don't even have there's not even a receipt or a paper ballot anywhere in the state of Georgia outside of provisional ballots. Nothing. It's entirely electronic and it's totally hackable. In fact, Howard Dean was on Tina Brown's show, Topic A with Tina Brown back in, I think it was 2009. And it was way back when. And in 90 seconds, Howard Dean changed the outcome of an election by hacking a Diebold machine. A Diebold vote. It wasn't the individual machine on which you vote. It was the machine that the state uses to add up the votes. It's just incredible. Lauren in Chicago. Hey, Lauren, what's on your mind today? Oh, wait a minute. That's not working. Let me try this. Lauren's on line 2. Let me try a different. Oh, link to the server is down. Okay. Our website crashed. So while the folks in Portland are fixing this, I want to just continue on this. The Beto O'Rourke proposes a war tax. I mentioned this before as part of his, I can't. It's well, maybe I can. Yeah. Okay. Beto O'Rourke has proposed a war tax, I think is probably a good idea. I think the whole thing is a good idea. We need to make the war real to people. And the war is not real to people. And by the way, we're resetting our phones here. If you have a problem getting through, just give us a shout. Somebody's got control of my computer, so. Anyhow, that's Nate. Okay, good. The Billionaires Club. This is remarkable. On the website medium.com, they have now published a letter calling for a moderate wealth tax on the fortunes of the richest 1/10 of the richest 1% of Americans. That's us. And the letter specifically refers to a plan offered by Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. Her proposal would create a wealth tax for households with $50 million or more in assets. Okay, so if you don't have more than $50 million worth of stocks, bonds, yachts, cars, or art, or gold, or checking accounts. Well, actually, it doesn't say checking accounts. Stocks, bonds, yachts, cars, and art. And I'm guessing it includes other things as well. If you don't have more than $50 million in assets, this won't affect you at all. And if you do have, say $51 million worth, then you will have to pay a 1% tax on that, which is certainly not going to kill you. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to, probably impact you in any way consequential at all, unless you're one of those Scrooge McDuck characters who wants who wants to, dive into your money bin periodically. But it's just a straightforward process. The Federal Reserve came out and said the wealthiest 1% of Americans saw their net worth grow by $21 trillion with a T, trillion dollars. We also, I just want to recap just very quickly something that we were talking about in the first hour, and that is this sense that some people feel of powerlessness and helplessness. I was telling the story of a friend of mine who's in the news business, and he said, that I met when I was in Los Angeles, and he said, I'm just freaked out by this whole Trump thing. I don't know what to do about it. It seems scary, if nothing else. And I'm checking my phone 10 times a day. I'm experiencing anxiety. What do I do? And my answer was get active. And then somebody called in and said, the definition of depression, because some people are actually depressed by this. The definition of depression is when you can't see your own future. And so I was talking about how in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, this kind of subset of psychology or psychotherapy that I've been trained in. In fact, I've been licensed to train other people in. There is this thing called timeline therapy. You work with what's called a timeline. You can stand on the floor, stand in the middle of a room, and just imagine that your future's in front of you and your past is behind you. And if your future and past are not in front of you and behind you, figure out where they are and move them just through an act of will. Just say, okay, my future's over here on my side. I'm going to move it out in front of me. And you may have to do it 4, 5, 6 times. You may have to do it a couple of days in a row before it just sticks there. It doesn't take real long. And once you've got your future in front of you, for most people, what they discover, and again, I'm not saying here this is the ultimate cure to depression or anything. There's lots of different causes for depression, for exogenous and endogenous. But this works remarkably well to have your future in front of you, and then in that future, start creating a future where Donald Trump is not only no longer president, but is off to prison. And then ask yourself, what can I do to make that happen? Where can I march? What politicians can I work for? How can I help take back the Democratic Party? How can we turn this country back into a democracy? So, all that stuff. So anyhow, if you try to call in, give us a shout again. I think our phones will be working soon. And we'll be right back. It's Thom Hartmann here with you. We're broadcasting live from Real Talk 910, AM 910 in San Francisco, our iHeartRadio affiliate here in San Francisco. I'm very pleased to be here with you. And check out Corey's
You're
Dumpster Fire
listening to
podcast.
the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back right after the break.
It's the Mueller report. We're on page 105. He's talking about Dimitri Simes and the Center for the National Interest, a foreign policy think tank that has good contacts with Russia, and how Kushner and Jeff Sessions were involved with this fellow, Dimitri Simes. The memorandum proposed building a small and carefully selected group of experts to assist Jeff Sessions with the campaign, operating under the assumption that Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on national security and foreign policy issues. The memorandum outlined key issues for the campaign, including, quote, a new beginning with Russia. B, National Interest is the magazine of CNI, hosts a foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel. During their March 24th phone call and their March 31st in-person meeting, Simes and Kushner discussed the possibility of CNI hosting a foreign policy speech by candidate Trump. Following these conversations, Simes agreed that he and others associated with CNI would provide behind-the-scenes input on the substance of the foreign policy speech, and the CNI officials would coordinate the logistics of the speech with Sessions and his staff, including Sessions' chief of staff, Rick Dearborn. In mid-April 2016, Kushner put Simes in contact with senior policy advisor Stephen Miller and forwarded to Simes an outline of the foreign policy speech that Miller had prepared. Simes sent back to the campaign bullet points with ideas for the speech that he had drafted with CNI Executive Director Paul Saunders and board member Richard Burt. Symes received subsequent draft outlines from Miller, and he and Saunders spoke to Miller by phone about substantive changes to the speech. It is not clear, however, whether CNI officials received an actual draft of the speech for comment. While Saunders recalled having received an actual draft, Symes did not, and the emails that CNI produced to this office do not contain such a draft. After board members expressed concern to Symes that CNI's hosting the speech could be perceived as an endorsement of a particular candidate, CNI decided to have its publication, The National Interest, serve as the host, and to have the event at the National Press Club. Kushner later requested that the event be moved to the Mayflower Hotel, which was another venue that Symes had mentioned during initial discussions with the campaign, in order to address concerns about security and capacity. On April 25, 2016, Saunders booked event rooms at the Mayflower to host both the speech and a VIP reception that was to be held beforehand. Saunders understood that the reception, at which invitees would have a chance to meet candidate Trump, would be a small event. Saunders decided who would attend by looking at the list of CNI invitees to the speech itself, and then choosing a subset for the reception. CNI's invitees to the reception included Sessions and Kislyak. The week before the speech, Symes had informed Kislyak that he would be invited to the speech and that he would have the opportunity to meet Trump. When the pre-speech reception began on April 27th, the receiving line was quickly organized so that attendees could meet Trump. Sessions first stood next to Trump to introduce him to the members of Congress who were in attendance. After those members had been introduced, Symes stood next to Trump and introduced him to the CNI invitees in attendance, including Kislyak. Symes perceived the introduction to be positive and friendly, but thought it clear that Kislyak and Trump had just met for the first time. Kislyak also met Kushner during the pre-speech reception. The two shook hands and chatted for a minute or two, during which Kushner recalled Kislyak saying, "We like what your candidate is saying. It's refreshing." Several public reports state that, in addition to speaking with Kushner at the pre-speech reception, Kislyak also met or conversed with Sessions at that time. Sessions stated to investigators, however, that he did not remember any such conversation. Nor did anyone else affiliated with CNI or the National Interest specifically recall a conversation or meeting between Sessions and Kislyak at the pre-speech reception. It appears that if a conversation occurred at the pre-speech reception, it was a brief one conducted in public view, similar to the exchange between Kushner and Kislyak. The office found no evidence that Kislyak conversed with either Trump or Sessions after the speech or would have had an opportunity to do so. Symes, for example, did not recall seeing Kislyak at the post-speech luncheon, and the only witness who accounted for Sessions' whereabouts stated that Sessions may have spoken to the press after the event, but then departed for Capitol Hill. Saunders recalled, based in part on a food-related request he received from a campaign staff member, that Trump left the hotel a few minutes after the speech to go to the airport. Item subset C, Jeff Sessions' post-speech interactions with CNI. In the wake of Sessions' confirmation hearings as Attorney General, questions arose about whether Sessions' campaign period interactions with CNI, apart from the Mayflower speech, included any additional meetings with Ambassador Kislyak or involved Russian-related matters. With respect to Kislyak contacts, on May 23, 2016, Sessions attended CNI's Distinguished Service Award dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. Sessions attended a pre-dinner reception and was seated at one of two head tables for the event. A seating chart prepared by Saunders indicated that Sessions was scheduled to be seated next to Kislyak, who appears to have responded to the invitation by indicating he would attend the event. Sessions, however, did not remember seeing, speaking with, or sitting next to Kislyak at the dinner. Although CNI board member Charles Boyd said he may have seen Kislyak at the dinner, Symes, Saunders, and Jacob Heilbrunn, editor of the National Interest, all had no recollection of seeing Kislyak at the May 23rd event. Kislyak also does not appear in any of the photos from the event that the office obtained. In the summer of 2016, CNI organized at least two dinners in Washington, D.C. for Sessions to meet with experienced foreign policy professionals. It's the Mueller Report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for the hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And tonight I'm broadcasting live from San Francisco. I just checked the website. Tonight I'll be at the First Church in Berkeley, and I just clicked on the link for tickets, and it says it's sold out. I'm not sure if that's actually the case, but it certainly looks to be the case. On Friday, I'll be in Darien at Frugal Muse Bookstore at 7 p.m. Tonight, Berkeley is 7 p.m. Some of our previous events have been 7:30. Just so make a note in your head. In fact, everything going forward here is at 7. And also in St. Paul in the Twin Cities, the Next Chapter Booksellers. That's going to be Saturday of this week. Formerly Common Good Books. I'll be there. So we, when we're doing our show remote here, sometimes weird things happen. One of them was our phones crashed, which is not normal because we have a new phone system. It's Lauren in Chicago. Hey, Lauren, what's on your mind? We got them working now.
Yeah, I hope I'm not the reason why, they're zapping your phone there. We're always wondering if they're listening anyway. But in any
no,
case,
I think I think it is we've got a Windows 10 problem with computers talking with each other, and our techie guy Dave Fulton is going to work on it. He's going to.
It's amazing these things even work at all, right? Sometimes.
Yeah,
it
is. It really is.
Wanted to talk about the kids in the camps. Okay, you mentioned and you referred to Trump as a sadist, right? Okay.
Yes.
Well, a sadist actually, even in his own kind of twisted way, and a lot of times, has some measure of fondness toward in their own perverse way, toward the people that they are, directing it to. So I think what Trump is doing is going really beyond that. And, one of your callers alluded to it, this idea of otherness.
You're right.
This idea that it's important to dehumanize people that you are trying to subjugate, right? Okay, that it's important not just to abuse them, but to really kind of think of them as less than human. And I would even go as far as to say, I think a lot of his supporters also feel like that too. So when you talk about these people who, when you talk about what's going on in the camp and it falls on deaf ears, I don't think it's deaf ears. I think that they like this. They want to see this because it's important to them to dehumanize these people in order to justify how they're being treated.
Yeah, Hitler called Jews, gypsies, gay people, etc., called them vermin. There was a word that, cockroaches was the word that Mussolini used, as I recall. I don't know what Franco did, but what language he used. But this is what dictators do when they're preparing to really, it might not necessarily be murder everybody, but when they want to
don't go. Yeah, I mean it could happen.
Yeah, and even military coups. I mean you don't even have to characterize people as animals or insects. You can simply characterize them as traitors, which otherizes them, which is what Trump has done with the New York Times and the media, in quotes. And we wonder why that guy walked into that newspaper, I think it was in Wisconsin, and shot 4 reporters. A story that just doesn't get anywhere near enough. Repeat coverage. So, Lauren, spot on. Thank you for calling and sharing that with us. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Yeah, you don't need a doctor's degree to see that Trump is mentally ill. He doesn't have a pet. He doesn't speak of a dog in the White House. I don't know of a president that didn't have a loving pet in the White House. So that's one sign. His other sign is he has no empathy. Even though he sees the way they're being treated, there's no empathy in this guy. How can you treat kids like that? I don't care what's wrong with you.
Well, John Kelly said that we are, and Kirsten Nielsen, confirmed this, that this policy, this so-called zero tolerance policy, yes, under the Obama administration, if a child came across the border and they thought the adult with the child was a child trafficker, or a kidnapper or something like that, they would separate the child from the adult. That happened, probably a few thousand times over the course of the 8 years of the Obama administration. But that's a whole different thing from taking children away from people that you know are their parents. That's the new policy of the Trump administration. And Kelly said that we're doing this to give them pain, to cause pain to these children and to cause pain to their parents so that the story will get back to Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua that it's so terrible in the United States you shouldn't even try. And, which is insane. And what it also tells us, Corky, is that these people, knowing this, I mean, this is well publicized in Mexico and south of Mexico, that this is what's happening in the United States, and knowing the hell that these people are going to be subjecting themselves and their children to, they're choosing to do it anyway because at least they'll still be alive. They have their older children are being subject to rape, their younger children are being subject to murder, or are watching their parents murdered. They're being recruited into gangs, or the gangs are torturing them or terrifying them. The farmers have lost their farms because climate change is killing the crop yields there in Central America. You've got large chunks of it starting to turn into desert. Another story that is well known around the world, doesn't get covered here. So yeah, spot on, Corky. Thank you very much for the call. Barbara in Kingston, New York. Hey, Barbara, what's up?
Hi, hey Tom, can you hear me okay?
Just fine, yeah.
Okay, what's up is children at the border, the detention centers. So I spent the day calling representatives, and I just wanted to let people know that AOC has two bills. If we're going to go through the slow process of making change that way, so if people could contact AOC and give her support and ask their representatives to support these two bills. One is that there be more judges to process the people, the asylum seekers, and the second bill is to stop the separation and to abolish ICE.
Wow. Okay, yeah. I am fully supportive of all of the above.
That I called, Tom, they're all lame. They're all like writing letters or something. And every woman I know is outraged about this. And we need to ask our representatives to hold public forums so we can express our disgust at this inhumane situation.
And the men I know are outraged about this too. In fact, this is just a crime. Barbara, thank you for the call. Spot on. And people, all around the country, people are like doing things. For example, I mentioned, Corey, a friend of mine here, has got this new podcast called The Dumpster Fire. Why is it called a dumpster fire? Because any situation Trump touches turns into a dumpster fire. It's the podcast is on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. And the Twitter handle is the DF, as in dumpster fire, the DF show on Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. Steve in McLean, Virginia. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Hey, I want to continue this conversation about the children and also about the religious right. First of all, I am a Christian, been there for a long time. I think like a fly to the fire. Sometimes I go to the Franklin Graham website. I've never seen him mention one thing at all about these children and this really despicable treatment at the border and with these concentration camps. And basically what I did was I posted about this on one of his posts. And, I say, why don't you have any outrage about this? And what I got back was a very negative reply from someone who, claims that these are satanic lies and all this stuff. And it really, really makes me angry. The thing from my perspective, there are things that sometimes a person has to put out. They just have to put out. It has to have a voice somewhere. And I just want to put out the voice. And I appreciate all the callers and all the things like talking with representatives and stuff like that. And that's all I'll say.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Well said. Appreciate the call. And thanks for watching us on YouTube there. Rick in Bellingham, Washington. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Yes, I'm a ditto to everything everybody has said, but I do not support O'Rourke's plan to add an additional tax to fund veterans programs, primarily because the Pentagon budget is actually $1.2 trillion when you look at it. The Project on Government Oversight and the Defense Monitor and numerous articles lay this out, and some think there's upward of $200 billion that could be cut without affecting the security of the nation. So I'd like for you to look into that further before supporting O'Rourke's proposal.
Well, Rick, the point of, I don't know Beto O'Rourke. I've never talked to him. He's never deigned to be on our show. But, and we've reached out, Sean has reached out to every single one of the Democratic candidates and specifically said, if you'd like to come on the program and make your case, feel free. So I don't know, exactly what's in his mind, but it sure looks to me like the purpose of his tax is not to raise money for the Pentagon or for anything else like that. It's a very, very small tax. If you make over a couple $100,000, it's like, well, let me get back to my one sheet here and I can give you the specific details. It's, where'd it go? Here we go. Beto O'Rourke. It is, if you make less than $30,000, it's $25, and if you make over $200,000, it's $1,000 a year. So really, the whole point of that tax isn't to raise money; it's to make sure that people realize that there is a cost to war, and that cost to war is specifically hitting them as a tax, including the people who are making under $30,000 a year, $25. That tax that's going to show up and they're going to say, whoa, I've got to pay for this war? Really? And these are, a lot of these folks are Trump supporters.
Listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So I think it's more essentially political theater than it is anything else. We'll be back with more of your calls. I'm live in San Francisco. Actually, we're going to check in with Talk Media News in about 4 minutes here. And welcome back. Lem in Sylvia, North Carolina. Hey, Lem, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hey, Tom. I just want to tell you that I would gladly take care of a couple of those children for what they're paying. I think saying $750 a day is
foster parents get, in some, it varies from state to state, but, when Louise and I were running a facility for abused kids in New Hampshire, and this was for kids who were so severe in their damage and their behavior that they couldn't live in a foster home. But back then, and, keep in mind, this was in the 1970s and 80s, so the dollar was worth more back then. But back then, foster families in New Hampshire got $125 a month.
Tom, I understand that, but if you're talking about $750 a day, have to take into account that's I'd like to make $273,750 a year.
Which is what that is. Yeah. I was just trying to point out the insane disparity.
Each one of those children, that's like $42 million a year for a camp with 150 kids in it.
And now you know, Lem, why John Kelly is on the board of directors of one of these companies.
Yeah. The thing is, for that kind, I could afford to buy soap.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and maybe a mattress, too. Lem, thanks a lot. It's great to hear from you. Joe in Cupertino, California. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Well, welcome to the neighborhood. I'm hoping that you get to enjoy the weather while you're in town. I'm so glad that you sold out. That's just great. I'm looking forward to tonight. But, this topic is really tough for me. I've had a lot of anxiety since, 2016. And right now I've had to deal with this by, pretty much, listening to you and maybe Amy. And I got to get away from MSN. I can't watch TV. I can't stand to hear about these children. I have 2 kids that stay home. I love my children. The only way I'm able to do this is look into them and read books. I bought a book for $27. I'm reading it. I listen to you. What am I on page? About 105. But, I can't stomach listening to what's going on and not do anything about it. And sitting and waiting till July 12th is a little too long. I don't know how many kids are going to be lost between now and whenever we decide we're going to do something about it. But time is of the essence here. As you read stories about how the Germans didn't realize that this was happening right in front of their eyes until it happened, and it was too late. I'm afraid we passed that line a while ago, and if we don't do something soon, well, I feel like my hands got blood on them. I don't know. It's just too sad to think about. And I sit here and
I share
my
your
eyes
feeling,
well
Joe.
up. And when I'm listening to these people calling,
the thing that infuriates me is when I watch network television, particularly cable TV, and they talk about these issues and they don't offer solutions. They don't have people on who are talking about what you can do about it. And that leaves people feeling powerless, which is exactly what Trump and the Republicans want.
Tonight, you'll see the power that's come because you see, very progressive part of the country here. And I'm just hoping that, we can make this change happen or lose any more children.
There you go. Joe, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. We're going to check in with Talk Media News in just a moment. Doug Christian will be with us in just a second. Stick around. Welcome back. We're live from San Francisco from AM 910, our iHeartRadio affiliate here in San Francisco. I'll be in Berkeley tonight. And on the line with us is Doug Christian with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Doug, what's going on in the world today? What's the top of your hit parade for the news?
Well, in about an hour, I'm going to go to the East Room to watch President present the Medal of Honor, which is a nonpartisan event because it's always pretty heroic when someone is willing to risk their life like that. And of course, 60% of people who receive that award actually die before receiving it. It usually.
So this is to a soldier. This is not the medal that he's going to give to Art Laffer.
No, that's not a Medal of Honor. That's a Medal of Medal of Freedom, I believe. Of course, the upper curve is kind of laughable in many ways. I mean, he drew it on the back of a napkin, and it was Ronald Reagan had used it to justify tax cuts, of course, in the 1980s. And there had been a time, perhaps in the late 50s, when the incremental tax rate for very high earners maybe was a little too high, and that curve was effective. But now the tax rate is so low in comparison that it's very it's so.
I don't think it was too high in this. When Reagan came into office, it was down to 74%. Lyndon Johnson dropped it from 91% down to 74%. At 91% during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we had the strongest growth of the middle class. And rich people were growing too, but they were actually growing, their wealth was growing at a rate slightly slower than the middle class, but they were already massively rich. When LBJ dropped it down to 74%, the rich started growing in wealth faster than the middle class, but not dramatically. And then when Reagan dropped it down to 25%, the wealth of the top 1% just absolutely screaming exploded, and it's been on steroids ever since. You mentioned the Medal of Freedom, Doug. The little known fact. If you add up, when I flew out here, just flying in from Seattle, I was standing at the gate, and they said, "Okay, people in wheelchair, if you're disabled, you can board first." And then they said, families with kids under 2 can board. And then they said, active duty military. We honor our active duty military because they are willing to walk into the line of fire. They're willing to walk into bullets. When a police officer gets killed in most places around the country, the funeral for the police officer basically shuts down the town. It's something, people show up for. It's like a giant, almost a parade kind of thing in memory of the police officer. Why? Because they're willing to walk into the line of fire. If you add up all the cops who are killed on the job in the United States last year, if you add up all the cops who were killed in the line of fire, and you add up all the U.S. military who were killed in action or killed with guns all around the world, and you add together those numbers of all the cops and all the soldiers who died in the line of duty, it's a smaller number than the number of children who were killed with guns in the United States last year. And it's been that way since the end of the Vietnam War. But no gate agent is saying, hey, if you're under 18, you may board first because we really honor your willingness to lay down your life for the profits of the gun manufacturers. It's nuts.
Yeah, the NRA is a gun lobby. That's what it really is, and the whole idea
it really is
profits for shareholders, and in that sense, the idea that somehow the NRA is about safe gun ownership anymore, that's just thrown out the window these days. Just not happening.
So, Doug, what else is up in the news?
Well, there are a lot of things. Of course, Iran is forefront right now. We've got two pugilists. One, John Bolton, who is National Security Advisor. And I don't see how he is advising in security. What he's doing is trying to get us into a war with Iran, as he tried to do with a previous president, get us into a war with Iraq. And then, of course, there is Mike Pompeo, who ought to know better because he was, in fact, a graduate of Annapolis. He is a very intelligent person, but he is just strangely hawkish and is also desiring in this idea of getting into a war with Iran, which is, I mean, anybody who has looked at the situation, I've actually been into that area many times, and I can honestly say that Iran is a much more robust country than perhaps our news media makes it out to be.
You've been inside Iran?
Yeah, I've been to Iran. My grandfather
Describe
was...
it for our listeners.
Yeah, my grandfather was in the Oriental rug business, and so I did quite a bit of traveling in that area. And I can say that Iran is a sophisticated, intelligent country, and this idea that somehow we would be able to just simply win a war in Iran it's just foolishness. It's absolute insanity. And it reminds me a bit, actually, of the kind of foolishness that we got into in Vietnam. In 1955, Graham Greene wrote The Quiet American about the French in Vietnam, and he was describing just the fruitlessness of fighting what they called then the Viet Minh, how they kind of blended into villages during the day and then ambushed at night. He said the only thing the French could do is burn down villages and just kill innocent people, which sounds like 1968 and My Lai all over again. We should have known that before we went to Vietnam, and we should know that now before we go into Iran.
Yeah, we should have learned from the lesson of the French in Vietnam, certainly. So what else is happening in the news?
Well, Trump, I guess, is musing privately that we should get out of the defense pact with Japan, so that, of course, there was a reason that we had a defense pact with Japan, and that he may have forgotten about, and that is, of course, the nationalism of Japanese nationalists who
and now the reason to have to keep our military bases there is North Korea and China. I mean, that's amazing. Doug Christian with Talk Media News. Thanks a lot, Doug.
Thanks.
Good talking with you. We'll be back. We're going to talk with Dr. Justin Frank, the psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry at Georgetown University Medical School, about the latest. He's got some new thoughts on Donald Trump. This is going to get fascinating. And then we'll continue our conversation with your calls after that.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
It's the Mueller report. We're on page 105. He's talking about Dimitri Simes and the Center for the National Interest, a foreign policy think tank that has good contacts with Russia, and how Kushner and Jeff Sessions were involved with this fellow, Dimitri Simes. The memorandum proposed building a small and carefully selected group of experts to assist Jeff Sessions with the campaign, operating under the assumption that Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on national security and foreign policy issues. The memorandum outlined key issues for the campaign, including, quote, a new beginning with Russia. B, National Interest is the magazine of CNI, hosts a foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel. During their March 24th phone call and their March 31st in-person meeting, Simes and Kushner discussed the possibility of CNI hosting a foreign policy speech by candidate Trump. Following these conversations, Simes agreed that he and others associated with CNI would provide behind-the-scenes input on the substance of the foreign policy speech, and the CNI officials would coordinate the logistics of the speech with Sessions and his staff, including Sessions' chief of staff, Rick Dearborn. In mid-April 2016, Kushner put Simes in contact with senior policy advisor Stephen Miller and forwarded to Simes an outline of the foreign policy speech that Miller had prepared. Simes sent back to the campaign bullet points with ideas for the speech that he had drafted with CNI Executive Director Paul Saunders and board member Richard Burt. Simes received subsequent draft outlines from Miller, and he and Saunders spoke to Miller by phone about substantive changes to the speech. It is not clear, however, whether CNI officials received an actual draft of the speech for comment. While Saunders recalled having received an actual draft, Simes did not, and the emails that CNI produced to this office do not contain such a draft. After board members expressed concern to Simes that CNI's hosting the speech could be perceived as an endorsement of a particular candidate, CNI decided to have its publication, The National Interest, serve as the host, and to have the event at the National Press Club. Kushner later requested that the event be moved to the Mayflower Hotel, which was another venue that Simes had mentioned during initial discussions with the campaign, in order to address concerns about security and capacity. On April 25th, 2016, Saunders booked event rooms at the Mayflower to host both the speech and a VIP reception that was to be held beforehand. Saunders understood that the reception, at which invitees would have a chance to meet candidate Trump, would be a small event. Saunders decided who would attend by looking at the list of CNI invitees to the speech itself, and then choosing a subset for the reception. CNI's invitees to the reception included Sessions and Kislyak. The week before the speech, Simes had informed Kislyak that he would be invited to the speech and that he would have the opportunity to meet Trump. When the pre-speech reception began on April 27th, the receiving line was quickly organized so that attendees could meet Trump. Sessions first stood next to Trump to introduce him to the members of Congress who were in attendance. After those members had been introduced, Simes stood next to Trump and introduced him to the CNI invitees in attendance, including Kislyak. Simes perceived the introduction to be positive and friendly, but thought it clear that Kislyak and Trump had just met for the first time. Kislyak also met Kushner during the pre-speech reception. The two shook hands and chatted for a minute or two, during which Kushner recalled Kislyak saying, "We like what your candidate is saying. It's refreshing." Several public reports state that, in addition to speaking with Kushner at the pre-speech reception, Kislyak also met or conversed with Sessions at that time. Sessions stated to investigators, however, that he did not remember any such conversation. Nor did anyone else affiliated with CNI or the National Interest specifically recall a conversation or meeting between Sessions and Kislyak at the pre-speech reception. It appears that if a conversation occurred at the pre-speech reception, it was a brief one conducted in public view, similar to the exchange between Kushner and Kislyak. The office found no evidence that Kislyak conversed with either Trump or Sessions after the speech or would have had an opportunity to do so. Simes, for example, did not recall seeing Kislyak at the post-speech luncheon, and the only witness who accounted for Sessions' whereabouts stated that Sessions may have spoken to the press after the event, but then departed for Capitol Hill. Saunders recalled, based in part on a food-related request he received from a campaign staff member, that Trump left the hotel a few minutes after the speech to go to the airport. Item subset C, Jeff Sessions' post-speech interactions with CNI. In the wake of Sessions' confirmation hearings as Attorney General, questions arose about whether Sessions' campaign period interactions with CNI, apart from the Mayflower speech, included any additional meetings with Ambassador Kislyak or involved Russian-related matters. With respect to Kislyak contacts,
On May 23, 2016, Sessions attended CNI's Distinguished Service Award dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. Sessions attended a pre-dinner reception and was seated at one of two head tables for the event. A seating chart prepared by Saunders indicated that Sessions was scheduled to be seated next to Kislyak, who appears to have responded to the invitation by indicating he would attend the event. Sessions, however, did not remember seeing, speaking with, or sitting next to Kislyak at the dinner. Although CNI board member Charles Boyd said he may have seen Kislyak at the dinner, Symes, Saunders, and Jacob Heilbrunn, editor of the National Interest, all had no recollection of seeing Kislyak at the May 23rd event. Kislyak also does not appear in any of the photos from the event that the office obtained. In the summer of 2016, CNI organized at least 2 dinners in Washington, D.C. for Sessions to meet with experienced foreign policy professionals. It's the Mueller Report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
It's page 117 of the Mueller Report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is our old buddy, Dr. Justin Frank. He's an MD. He's a psychoanalyst and clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University. He's the author of Trump on the Couch, Bush on the Couch, Obama on the Couch. His Twitter handle is Justin Frank MD, as you might recall. And Dr. Frank, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be back here. I'm worried there might be an echo with this way I've set up the phone. Does it sound okay for you?
No, it sounds just fine. What's happening is I'm doing this show remotely. I'm in San Francisco, and there's about a 1 second time delay. It's called latency, and we're just going to have to work around it. So, you know, it's not a problem. Now,
so we're okay. I just don't want to...
Yeah, we're good. We've been having a conversation here about how it seems that Donald Trump actually is enjoying the cruelty that he's inflicting on these children at the border, and that, you know, he's threatening now to annihilate Iran because they called him a moron or a mentally retarded person. You have some new thoughts on Donald Trump and what's motivating him and driving him. You want to share that with us?
Sure. Many of my findings were in the book Trump on the Couch. But the one of them that was not really emphasized until now is, I guess I ended one chapter by saying that Trump always lies, either to improve his position or to make a sale or all of that. But I wrote at the end of that chapter on lying that he is now in the position of lying to save his life, certainly to save his job. And that was written a year ago or more. And I think that right now, the form that lying is taking, it's not really exactly lying, is that he has a deep, unconscious, ongoing fantasy or thought about himself, that he is invincible, that he is God, that when he says make America great again, it means that he is going to make America great again. It means that it's all up to him. He's the kind of person who, as a father, would scare a child before they go to bed, then come in when the child has a nightmare and turn on the lights and say, I'm going to save you and make everything better. This is a form of a God complex that was first described many, many years ago by a psychoanalyst, a colleague of Freud's named Ernest Jones. And he called it the God complex in 1913. And some of the characteristics are that, A, it's unconscious, B, that people who have it are extremely vague about what they're going to do, but they always promise things in the future. Mm-hmm. And C, that they feel that they can control everything, that they have direct access to the best information, the best courses of action. And that gets increased over time when a person feels threatened, when a person feels uncomfortable. So they move into more of an active God complex behavior. So what Trump did with Iran, bringing us to the brink, as he said, and then calling back the planes, as he said, and now today saying that he could obliterate them, that he alone can do that. It's not. It is really very, very dangerous to have a person who thinks like that as president of the United States. It's bad enough to have them as a CEO or bad enough to have them as a parent. But he is really up against it. And there's a feeling that I have that clinically he is deeply disturbed because these unconscious fantasies, I think, are dominating his conscious life.
Wow. Yeah, we are getting a little bit of an echo.
Okay, well, here, I'll do it like this. I'll have to hold the phone like this.
Yeah, that's...
Are you still getting an echo, or is that better?
Yeah, no, if you just talk on a phone like a normal phone,
okay.
that usually
He shrugs off what happened to Khashoggi, for instance, or he shrugs off even the internment camps that are going on in the south of the border, as if they're not his concern. He's above it. It is a very disturbing thing because what happens when you have a person like this as president, nothing can reach him except some threat of exposure. But otherwise, nothing can reach him. Facts do not matter. Whatever you say is easily dismissed. It's as if I'm holding this phone, but it would be as if you were going to start to talk to me, Tom, I would have a filter in my ear that would say, blah, 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 Dr. Frank, blah, 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 Dr. Frank. That's all I would hear. That's all he hears. Blah, 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 Donald Trump, blah, 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 blah. That's how his mind works right now. It is very disturbing.
So you are a clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University at the medical school there. And you are saying out loud on this program that Donald Trump is mentally ill and that mental illness is actually a threat to our republic, to the world?
That is exactly what I'm saying. He is a threat to our republic, and somebody needs to help quarantine him or muzzle him or help him calm down. He is the president, and it's very hard to do any of these things. But basically, he's the kind of person who, I taught a seminar for 10 years at GW called The Psychopathology of the Psychoses. It was about the psychodynamics that underlie psychotic thinking and psychotic behavior. And Trump fits very well into that course that I taught years ago. He would be the poster boy for that course. He's he's a disturbed person, and just because a person looks semi-normal and can wear a long red tie and tie his shoes and dress up and even talk in a meeting, if you listen carefully to what he says and to his tweets, you'll see all kinds of cracks in what he says and in what he tweets. You'll see a lot of particular defense mechanisms in action. One of them is called projection, where he accuses somebody else of doing something he does. It's an unconscious process. But the second thing you'll see is what's called delusional projection, which you only see in psychosis, which is what he's saying when he talks about it being a witch hunt. The witch hunt talk is actually something he sort of liked at first, but it's moved into a kind of delusional projection because he was the one who was doing a witch hunt on Obama with birthers. He was the one who was doing all of these things in the past with his father as a child. So it's a delusional projection. He really believes it. He believes it's a witch hunt. He's not just saying that. And I think that kind of belief system is extremely dangerous. I don't know what to say about it more. I mean, I would, if you were my
especially
patient,
with regard to Iran.
Yes, with regards to Iran.
This could be World War III.
Completely.
Because we have a psychotic president.
Well, it's like having a person, when I had people on the inpatient service, when I was running the ward at GW, some patients would say, "Doctor, you're putting us in jail. You're not giving us a pass to go out of the hospital and walk around." And I would have to say to them, wait a minute. You put yourself in this hospital by your behavior of assaulting a policeman or whatever they did, and you put yourself here. And so to say I'm not allowing you out makes me responsible when you're the one who's responsible. Trump is the one who stopped the treaty with Iran. He's the one who's responsible for this escalation.
Yeah, absolutely right. Dr. Justin Frank, thank you so much for being with us, sir.
Okay, sorry.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Oh, it's all good. We'll be back. We'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day after this. Stick around. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Okay, please ask Joyce to thank Dr. Frank. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Mary in Warrenton, Oregon. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Glad to speak with you again. I was reading, what's his name? Andrew Sullivan's articles about this stuff. And I think this man's got a real good point. Are you familiar with him?
Oh, I've been familiar with Andrew Sullivan for years, sure.
I'm not.
What's the point that he's making now? Yes.
Well, what he's basically saying is the Democrats have, when it comes to democratic issues, we know what they are. It's, it's health care, the environment, education, progressive taxes, et cetera. And we all know where we stand on those things. But when it comes to immigration, the Democratic policy seems to be dreamers, and then it goes, part 2 is called GOP racist, and 3, hand-wringing. We don't have an immigration policy. And what this guy's saying is that Trump's number one issue, immigration, which keeps his base riled up, which is immigration, at which he has totally failed, is immigration, and the Democrats have no response. Elizabeth Warren has all these policies and plans. She doesn't have one on immigration. None of them do.
Wow.
And what he's saying is that Democrats need to take over immigration just like they did health care, the environment, saving Social Security, all the Democratic issues. We need to make, in 2020, immigration needs to be the Dems' number one issue. Solve it, take it by the horns, make it our issue. Tighten up the borders, make reasonable laws, add funds to all these things we want to do, take care of the dreamers, have a policy. But the thing we got to remember when we take over all this and say that and make it our number one issue for 2020 is that we cannot solve the white anxiety of all these so-called racists. I mean, the GOP has a lot of racists. They used to be in our party. Now they're in their party. But the other ones are growing it because of their fear of immigration. That's what's expanding their racism and the hate and all the other non-white issues. And so what it is white anxiety. You don't address that, as they're sitting and watching the world change to a non-white majority, their fears and their anxiety about this is real. And you can't help people and bring them over by calling them racist. We have to address their anxiety about this. And so I don't know what the answer is to that.
Mary, if I could just speak to that real quickly, because we're going to hit a break here in a second. One of the things that Republicans said to white people for centuries, for decades, particularly in my lifetime, was black people are coming to get your jobs, right? And they used that to divide white from black people. Now they're saying to black people, Hispanics are coming to get your jobs, and to white people. They're using this to split people. So that fear is actually, largely an illegitimate fear, but it's being fanned by these right-wing think tanks and by the Republican Party and all that stuff. So that's something that we've got to do something about. Mary, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Stick around.
Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. And Sean, you might want to tell Joyce that I just put line 4 on hold. Bobby in Skokie, Illinois. Hey, Bobby, thanks for listening to AM 820. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Thank you for having me on your show.
Sure.
I wanted to make a couple of points. I'm actually an undocumented immigrant, and I've been living in this country for over 20 years. We played by the rules. My grandparents were U.S. citizens. I had a great-grandmother who was a permanent resident. We came legally. My grandparents applied for us. We waited in line for many years to become permanent residents. Both of my grandparents passed away 2 weeks before the interview, and my great-grandmother passed away. So we've been stuck in this process forever. There's no way for us to legalize. There's no way for us to apply to do anything. So when people criticize and they say, well, you've been here for so long, how come you were never able to apply and legalize? The system is so broken. I mean, there's no way for my family to legalize. I have 2 kids that are U.S. citizens that were born here. But I just wanted to talk about there's tens of thousands of people that are in my situation. And it's just unfortunate. They asked us if we can maybe get a substitute sponsor, to take the place of my grandparents as sponsors, but it's impossible because there has to be a close family member, and we don't have any in this country. So that's how important immigration is.
Oh, geez, I just dropped this call. I'm so very sorry. I was trying to, I see calls coming in on line 7 and 10 right now, and I was just trying to put one on hold, and I accidentally dumped my caller. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear about your situation. This is what happens when, we still need, comprehensive immigration reform. We need to clean this stuff up. But, what is going on right now is just, with the Trump administration, is just an absolute mess. And Sean, you can tell Joyce I just put line 1 on hold. It's just an absolute mess. I mean, this is something that we've got to get fixed, and we've got to get it fixed quickly. Mike in Winnacone, Wisconsin. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, my thought is that at some point we're going to have to atone for what our government is doing, no matter what we think of the president and the people that represent us. We're going to have to atone for these children because it's all done in our name, whether we like it or not. The citizens of Germany had to atone for what was done in their name and had to go into the concentration camps and clean them out. So,
Mike, respectfully, I agree with your sentiment, but we have not yet atoned for torturing people during the during the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. We have not yet atoned for for slavery. We have not yet atoned for the slaughter of Native Americans. There's it's a noble sentiment, but
our reckoning's coming.
I think so. Karmically, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you that there is a reckoning coming.
That's my only sentiment.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. Elsa in Bainbridge Island, Washington. Hey, Elsa, what's on your mind today?
Yes. Hi, Tom. What I wanted to propose, and I'd like you to comment on it, is that if we do get into a war with Iran, and it's a much bigger territory than Iraq, wouldn't the draft have to be reinstated? If it were reinstated, I can't see people of draft age today putting up with that. I think there would be a riot. I will take your answer offline.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Elsa, and this is one of the reasons why we need to be pointing this out to young people, because this is just an absolute mess. Thank you. Spot on. And in fact, frankly, I think a draft would be a good thing because, again, young people would be more resistant they would be wanting to do something about this. I've got a caller from an 818 area code. I'm sorry, I don't have your name or where you're calling from. What's on your mind?
Spot on. In fact, are you talking to me?
I am. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
My name is Harolyn Matisoff, and I agree totally with your gentleman caller that just called. I think that the children that are sitting in those horrible boxes at jails, at the border is absolutely criminal. I do believe that help should be given to them. They're without soap and water. They are crying for their mothers and fathers. It reminds me of Dachau. I'm Jewish, and I remember the Second World War and what the Nazis did. And if this doesn't remind you people of Germany and the Nazis, then I don't know what to say to you. We need to start picketing and start taking to the street and start walking and making it very, very clear to that government that we will not stand for this. So
yeah, I could see signs. People. I completely agree with you, and I could see people holding signs on street corners that say "Save the children from Trump" or "Save the children from the detention camps."
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
It's the Mueller report. We're on page 105. He's talking about Dimitri Simes and the Center for the National Interest, a foreign policy think tank that has good contacts with Russia, and how Kushner and Jeff Sessions were involved with this fellow, Dimitri Simes. The memorandum proposed building a small and carefully selected group of experts to assist Jeff Sessions with the campaign, operating under the assumption that Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on national security and foreign policy issues. The memorandum outlined key issues for the campaign, including, quote, a new beginning with Russia. B, National Interest is the magazine of CNI, hosts a foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel. During their March 24th phone call and their March 31st in-person meeting, Symes and Kushner discussed the possibility of CNI hosting a foreign policy speech by candidate Trump. Following these conversations, Symes agreed that he and others associated with CNI would provide behind-the-scenes input on the substance of the foreign policy speech, and the CNI officials would coordinate the logistics of the speech with Sessions and his staff, including Sessions' Chief of Staff, Rick Dearborn. In mid-April 2016, Kushner put Symes in contact with Senior Policy Advisor Stephen Miller and forwarded to Symes an outline of the foreign policy speech that Miller had prepared. Symes sent back to the campaign bullet points with ideas for the speech that he had drafted with CNI Executive Director Paul Saunders and board member Richard Burt. Symes received subsequent draft outlines from Miller, and he and Saunders spoke to Miller by phone about substantive changes to the speech. It is not clear, however, whether CNI officials received an actual draft of the speech for comment. While Saunders recalled having received an actual draft, Symes did not, and the emails that CNI produced to this office do not contain such a draft. After board members expressed concern to Symes that CNI's hosting the speech could be perceived as an endorsement of a particular candidate, CNI decided to have its publication, The National Interest, serve as the host, and to have the event at the National Press Club. Kushner later requested that the event be moved to the Mayflower Hotel, which was another venue that Symes had mentioned during initial discussions with the campaign, in order to address concerns about security and capacity. On April 25th, 2016, Saunders booked event rooms at the Mayflower to host both the speech and a VIP reception that was to be held beforehand. Saunders understood that the reception, at which invitees would have a chance to meet candidate Trump, would be a small event. Saunders decided who would attend by looking at the list of CNI invitees to the speech itself, and then choosing a subset for the reception. CNI's invitees to the reception included Sessions and Kislyak. The week before the speech, Symes had informed Kislyak that he would be invited to the speech and that he would have the opportunity to meet Trump. When the pre-speech reception began on April 27th, the receiving line was quickly organized so that attendees could meet Trump. Sessions first stood next to Trump to introduce him to the members of Congress who were in attendance. After those members had been introduced, Symes stood next to Trump and introduced him to the CNI invitees in attendance, including Kislyak. Symes perceived the introduction to be positive and friendly, but thought it clear that Kislyak and Trump had just met for the first time. Kislyak also met Kushner during the pre-speech reception. The two shook hands and chatted for a minute or two, during which Kushner recalled Kislyak saying, "We like what your candidate is saying. It's refreshing." Several public reports state that, in addition to speaking with Kushner at the pre-speech reception, Kislyak also met or conversed with Sessions at that time. Sessions stated to investigators, however, that he did not remember any such conversation. Nor did anyone else affiliated with CNI or the National Interest specifically recall a conversation or meeting between Sessions and Kislyak at the pre-speech reception. It appears that if a conversation occurred at the pre-speech reception, it was a brief one conducted in public view, similar to the exchange between Kushner and Kislyak. The office found no evidence that Kislyak conversed with either Trump or Sessions after the speech or would have had an opportunity to do so. Symes, for example, did not recall seeing Kislyak at the post-speech luncheon, and the only witness who accounted for Sessions' whereabouts stated that Sessions may have spoken to the press after the event, but then departed for Capitol Hill. Saunders recalled, based in part on a food-related request he received from a campaign staff member, that Trump left the hotel a few minutes after the speech to go to the airport. Item subset C, Jeff Sessions' post-speech interactions with CNI. In the wake of Sessions' confirmation hearings as Attorney General, questions arose about whether Sessions' campaign period interactions with CNI, apart from the Mayflower speech, included any additional meetings with Ambassador Kislyak or involved Russian-related matters. With respect to Kislyak contacts, on May 23, 2016, Sessions attended CNI's Distinguished Service Award dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. Sessions attended a pre-dinner reception and was seated at one of two head tables for the event. A seating chart prepared by Saunders indicated that Sessions was scheduled to be seated next to Kislyak, who appears to have responded to the invitation by indicating he would attend the event. Sessions, however, did not remember seeing, speaking with, or sitting next to Kislyak at the dinner. Although CNI board member Charles Boyd said he may have seen Kislyak at the dinner, Symes, Saunders, and Jacob Heilbrunn, editor of the National Interest, all had no recollection of seeing Kislyak at the May 23rd event. Kislyak also does not appear in any of the photos from the event that the office obtained. In the summer of 2016, CNI organized at least 2 dinners in Washington, D.C. for sessions to meet with experienced foreign policy professionals. It's the Mueller Report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And boy, what an amazing day. Here's the latest breaking news, and I have no idea where this is going to go, but this seems to me like this might be the biggest scandal of the Trump administration. It turns out that Bill Barr, the guy who covered up Iran-Contra for George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan back in the day, he was Attorney General in 1992 when he recommended to George Bush that he pardon Ollie North and Elliot Abrams and all these other guys. Bill Barr. This is stories over on Raw Story right now. Attorney General Bill Barr, and the author is Bob Brigham. Attorney General Bill Barr killed 7 different investigations started by Special Counsel Robert Mueller just 10 days after Mueller submitted his report. CNN's Caitlin Palance had refiled the request to unseal documents related to the Special Counsel's investigation, and on Monday, the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia agreed. By the way, the chief judge at that court is Merrick Garland. Chief Judge Beryl A. Howell ordered a release of multiple documents, including Attachment B, which listed information on applications for court orders requested by Mueller. It shows that 7 cases were closed on April Fool's Day, only 10 days after Mueller submitted his report. The orders involved companies AT&T, Twitter, and Facebook. Amazing. Boy, do I want to know more about this. There is something rotten in Denmark, as they say. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I just want to congratulate you. You know, if you could win an Emmy Award, you would have got it by now. I just want to point out that these people that are striving to become very wealthy, it has to be recognized that they got a lot of ego and a lot of ego defense mechanisms, and I wish people generally knew more about that. But they're often as psychotic, somebody striving for $1 billion, want to control that much power. They're as psychotic as Jeffrey Dahmer. The only difference is they're not collecting heads.
Yeah, they're collecting cash. It's Scrooge McDuck and his money bin.
And it's distorting everything so badly. And the growth of the profits is so exponential and cannot be supported in any way.
Yeah,
Doomed to fail.
I'm absolutely with you. No, it's I've talked before about hoarding syndrome. There's this condition. It's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. It's a kind of a subset of obsessive compulsive disorder where people just hoard everything. You see these people who's you can't make your way. Well, in fact, they did a TV show about it, Hoarders, where you can't even make your way through their living room because they got newspapers piled up to the ceiling, and their kitchen is filled with old empty tin cans and all that kind of stuff. And some people came out of the Great Depression so badly damaged by the lack of everything that they just kind of kept everything. My dad and mom were like that. Dad had 20,000 books in his basement. He couldn't bear to part with one. But it wasn't hoarding syndrome. The house was not uninhabitable. Mom collected buttons
the basic psychology is, many of the people successful in any field are compulsive, neurotic. They're compulsively driven. That is why they're successful in that field, but it has to be recognized. Yeah. There's mental illness there.
Yeah, absolutely. There are more, and James, thank you for the call. One of the things that we know, by the way, and there's a great book, Snakes and Suits, that talks about this, is that increasingly at the highest levels of corporate governance, CEOs, that the number of psychopaths that you find among CEOs is dramatically higher than the number of psychopaths you find in the general population. Barbara in Seattle. Hey, Barbara, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Well, I I love your dad because I've got that many books. But anyway, I'm I'm calling you because people have to understand what we subsidize. And we subsidize stupidity in this country because people can't read. You know the only time government has to tell the truth? You're a very intelligent person. Do you know the only time that government at every level in this country has to tell the truth?
Is what?
Bond prospectus. And the day that people in this country can learn to read what their taxes are going for, they will start voting for democracy instead of fascism. And do you know who the Pools are? The Pools.
No, I don't.
They wrote the basic book about who financed Hitler. In this country, we have the Nazis won the Second World War because everything we do in this country, $1 trillion national budget goes to war. $700 billion Defense Department, $500 billion debt service, illegal wars, unconstitutional wars.
Yeah, I'm with you, Barbara, and we need to change it. Barbara, thank you so much for the call. Jackie in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Hey, Jackie, what's on your mind today?
I just have a question regarding Nancy Pelosi and what Dr. Justin was just talking about, and impeachment. Has anyone talked to her regarding, I know some people say that she's doing the right thing by not allowing impeachment politically, but Trump does so much damage every day, and he really is psychotic. I mean, and has anyone ever discussed this point with her to see whether it's still worth not doing impeachment?
Today, I think, or yesterday, we got the either 70th or 80th member Democrat in the U.S. House of Representatives saying open an impeachment inquiry. When that number gets probably over about 120 or 130, more than half the caucus, at that point, I don't see how Nancy Pelosi can ignore it.
So you think it has to get to that point first?
In all probability, it will, yeah. I think so.
Okay. All right, thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Jackie. I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. I'm moving over to the Telos assistant producer software, just FYI to the folks in Portland. I've got a caller here in the 360 area code. You want to tell me your name and where you're calling from?
Yeah, Fred Bremerton. I've talked to you before, Tom.
Hey, Fred.
I appreciate
what's on your
you
mind?
taking my call.
Okay.
I was sitting in Seattle during your talk. I bought your book about guns. I'm a liberal. I think I talked to you about this before. I'm a liberal who loves democracy. I'm a liberal who enjoys what the freedoms we have. I'm not a pigmented person. I don't look at people because of their skin color. I look at it because what's coming out of their mouth. The first day of the inauguration that comb-over started speaking, I knew the first sentence out of his mouth, it was going to be a bad 4 years. He makes no sense about anything he talks about. How can a man with so much so-called money and power take it upon himself to be such a me-ite? It's all about him. He cares nothing about our country. Remember when who was the guy that did the audio War of the Worlds? Everybody got scared
Orson
because
Welles.
of what they heard on the radio. It's happening again. I really believe that America. Oh God, I got so much to say to you. I want the people of America to know that there is a war going on. I've lived in the South, as have you. You know that there are a lot of white crackers down there that would love to have nothing more than white people running this country. And it ain't going to happen. I come from a long line of Americans.
White people have been running this country for a long, long time and continue to. And even when white people are no longer a majority, there's going to be probably a generation where white people are hanging on to that kind of power. But I get what you're saying. Thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. Don in Des Moines, Iowa. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, hi, Tom. I want to know how come we haven't had TV cameras in there, and we pay for this. Are these people being held? I mean, they're not held criminally, are they? And one more thing, Tom. I live in a nursing home, and I make $50 a month, and I gave $25. So I'm doing this to go to other people. Thank God for free speech. I'll get offline now.
Okay, Don, thanks a lot. It's great to hear from you. Dave in Chicago. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, you were talking about depression and things that make you feel good. I gave $25 last week to the Dump Mitch website, and I felt so good all day long.
Yeah, instead of going to a website like that, go to the website of there's a Democrat who has declared that, I believe it's a woman, that she is going to be challenging him as a Democrat. Now, I don't know, how the Democratic primary is going to work out in Kentucky, and I don't know how far we are from it and all that kind of stuff. But usually giving money directly to candidates is much safer. Sometimes you get websites where, the administrative costs or whatever, some of them are scams. Sometimes the administrative costs are so high that not a lot of money is going off to the candidate. But I get what you're saying, Dave. I'm just not familiar with that. It may be a great website.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that woman and see if I can give her some money too when I'm feeling down.
Yeah, there you go. Because what you're talking about is what I've been talking about, which is the best way to deal with this stuff is to do something. Dave, thanks a lot for the call. It's very therapeutic to do something. We'll be right back. Sean, please ask Joyce and Louise to check out my messages on the assistant producer Telos software. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back, Gary in Rainier, Washington. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I was listening the other day, and you were talking about how we need to rebrand ourselves and get away from this far left topic. And because everyone that talks about far left, they're getting the benefits of all the things. And you brought up rebranding ourselves as FDR Democrats. And I really think we should talk about that every day. That's such a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Bumper stickers. Even I was thinking I was give the free speech, and that would really be something that I think everyone that listens would go for. And it's not a bumper sticker where people are going to attack your car or anything. It's FDR Democrat. I think it would work.
I think you're right. And I think it's something that's really worth doing paying attention to and doing. Gary, thank you. Thank you for the affirmation on that, and I'll start mentioning it more frequently. I appreciate it. It's great to hear from you. Andrew in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Andrew, what's up?
So I just thought I'd take the time to ask you a question on your thoughts. What do you think the probability of us actually being able to and having the wherewithal to change the system so that people are actually accountable? Because why is the highest law enforcement officer in the land answerable to nobody except for the President of the United States?
You mean Bill Barr?
Yeah. I mean, he was able to just dismantle a whole bunch of stuff, and he's not answerable to anybody. Why is he not? Why is he answerable to the president and not Congress?
He is answerable. Actually, he's answerable to Congress. The Attorney General can be impeached. He's a senior officer. He's appointed by the president, and he's confirmed by the Senate. And because he's been confirmed by the Senate, he can be impeached by the Senate or by the House and the Senate. And I think that if these 7 investigations that Bill Barr has shut down, turn out to be as consequential as I think they are, then we should be impeaching him right now. So that's my take on it.
Well, I agree with you. So, I mean, I think that if we do get power back, We need to change a little bit on the levers to make sure that people are answerable and accountable for their actions.
Yeah, I am totally with you, and we need to get to that ASAP.
Because if nothing else benefited us out of this Trump regime, it's shined a giant beam of sunlight on all the backward crap that they do.
Yeah, and when you've got a situation where Bill Barr has actually been able to shut down 7 investigations, I mean, there's something really, really wrong with that. So, anyhow,
Thanks, sir.
And yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. Good talking to you. And not just broadly something wrong with that, but there's something wrong with that, fundamentally at its core. We've got a serious problem here in the United States. I realize I keep saying that, but and the solution is citizen activism. There is, in a democracy, there is no other solution. The military is not going to overthrow the government and save us. In fact, when militaries overthrow governments, it never saves anybody. Anyhow, we'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Alice in, my assistant producer is not responding. And what the heck is going on? No, do not close software on my desktop. Damn it. Please keep people away from my desktop, Sean. Okay. Let's see here. Line 6. Alice. Oh, I've got to... Hang on just a second, I got to reconfigure it now because it got shut down. Alice let's see, where are you, Alice? In Lamont, Illinois. Hey, Alice, what's on your mind? Alice, you are on the air. No, that's not Alice, I'm sorry. That's the wrong line. This is Alice. Alice, you're on the air. Hey, Alice, what's on your mind today?
Okay, I'll start all over. Okay, I just want to make you aware. I don't know. I guess they're sending these to everybody from the Republicans. Mm-hmm. It's called their election project, and there's a big survey, Trump Agenda survey, and with it comes a scathing letter against the Democrats, and it's upset me totally. This letter is awful and horrible. But at the end, in the survey, you fill it out, but I'm not going to send it in because I think they might use it against me. They want you to contribute X amount of dollars, from 25 to whatever. But then in the box at the lower part of the survey, it says, if you can't afford to send anything now, that's okay. But we would request you send $15 for the processing fee. Just wanted to make you and your listeners aware. That's what's going on.
That is amazing. That is
absolutely
amazing.
Horrible. What they said in this letter about us.
What did they say about the Democrats in the letter? I'm curious.
Oh, Mike, it's a 2-page letter. If I could send it to you or email it to you. Oh, my goodness.
No, you can just, describe. And is this one of the, Democrats want open borders? That lie?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
we are...
okay.
Yeah, we're seduced.
Yeah. Alice, thank you for the call. I agree, that is terrible. Manny in Moreno Valley, California. Hey, Manny, what's up?
Yeah, hey, Tom, I just wanted to call in and agree with you. You were talking earlier about CEOs and being psychopaths, and I want to agree with that point, too. I had this discussion with my brother, and he explained to me, he said, if you think about it, if you're a CEO and your company has to lay off 10,000 workers to stay profitable, if you're a psychopath, you can do it in a heartbeat. And once he explained it to me, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Oh no. It's go back to Chainsaw Al Dunlop, who laid off 10,000 people at Sunbeam and a few other companies. He was famous for it. He was brought in to just lay off people. He did it gleefully. The guy, in my opinion, was a psychopath. And the CEOs who put humanity essentially behind profit, put profit ahead of humanity. It's just an absolutely terrible thing. Manny, thank you for the call. Spot on. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, for therapy, I've mentioned him to you before, the guy named Emile Coué, I think several centuries ago, before we called it autosuggestion and the power of positive thinking. Basically, just every day in every way.
Wasn't he the guy who had the thing where the program where you say to yourself every day in every way, I am getting better, and you say it while you're looking at yourself in the mirror?
Yes, or anywhere. The point to me seems to be God is in all things. You curse nothing ever because it's God. It's the way it's supposed to be. You do to reform, of course, but you don't curse anything. You bless it all the time.
Yeah, amen.
Bless everything.
And at the very least, we can look at other human beings like these people coming from across the border and say, yes, you are blessed too. Rich in Aurora, Colorado. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, great show as always. That gentleman from Kentucky, Amy McGrath, is the opponent that they think can beat, and she just barely lost to him last time. But, Tom, I just wanted to tell you, you were talking about them hacking the kids who hacked the voting rolls. I will bet my life that if we don't get this guy out of office by impeachment, the elections are going to get rigged again. Keep in mind, he won by 80,000 votes with 3 states. It's not going to take 3 states. We absolutely have to start impeachment hearings, and we don't even have to vote. But I hope you're wrong about get to 120 of people, because they say if we don't do something by July and it gets into next year in the elections, our chances are slim to none.
I don't care if it gets into the elections. I mean, this is what the pundits, this is what the chattering class, the multimillionaires on television are telling you, and even the ones who call themselves Democrats, but who obviously, like Donnie Deutsch, are not, or not, at least not in spirit. But you can impeach a president any old time, just like you can put somebody on the Supreme Court any old time. Rich, thanks a lot for the call. Andy in Belmont, Michigan. Hey, Andy, we're just down to about a minute. What's up?
Hey, I also got that survey, and a couple of the guys I work with also got it. It's called an election survey, and Romney, she's kind of the editor of it, and it's telling us.
Oh, she's the chairperson of the RNC.
Right, exactly. And what they're doing is they're asking, it's a survey of what's your top 5 or 10 questions or things that you want the Trump administration to do. And it starts, it's got on there about the wall. It's got about taxes for the rich. It's got, and then at the end it says the lying, cheating Democrats. And I'm just going, that's exactly what you guys are doing to us. And you're saying it's us doing it to you. It's just, and it's just, and it's a registered letter. And then, of course, they don't give us a stamped envelope to mail it back. You have to put 10 cents or, stamp on there.
Right, because they really don't want it. They don't care what you have to say. The whole point is they want you to read the letter. And the letter is filled with lies and slanders against Democrats. Amen. Andy, thank you very much. Yeah, if you get one of these surveys, you need to know exactly what it is. And that is exactly what it is. It's lies and slander. Thanks so much for being with us today. And wow, what a day. And tonight I'll be in Berkeley at the First Church, Friday night in Chicago, Saturday in Minneapolis, well, actually in St. Paul. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. And by the way, action is the best therapy. Get out there and do something. Tag
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.